Delivery, day in, day out. Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GBNews,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico has been shot and wounded. Mr. Fico was shot in front of a cultural community centre in the town where a government meeting was being held. We'll have all of the latest on this breaking story. Next up, the policing minister has demanded that police must increase their use of stop and search to tackle the cancer of knife crime and stop bowing to campaign groups who slam it as racist. I'll speak to a top cop and also a mother and a grandmother who've lost loved ones to knife crime. And food bank users are at an all-time high with a 94% increase in 5 years. And Labour say this is a result of 14 years of Tory misery. But is that the case? Or are they being abused by people who don't really need them? Well, that's all coming up in your next hour. And as well as all that, we've got 2 astonishing political stories. The first one is this. 50 MPs and peers have written to James Cleverly demanding that Britain takes in refugees from Palestine. What could possibly go wrong? Well, look to Denmark, where they tried this in the 1990s, and 64% of those taken in went on to get criminal records. And I can dramatically announce that after last night on the Jacob Rees-Mogg show, when Jacob would say that Richard Tice, Nigel Farage and Ben Habib of the Reform Party, of course, should be welcomed into the Tory party tonight. The dons of the right, the godfathers of the right, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage will dramatically meet in this studio. Could this be the breakthrough the political right has been waiting for? 2 dons, 2 godfathers coming together. Or has the plan got no legs? Will it end up sleeping with the fishes? That's all coming up on this show. Get in touch the usual ways, gbnews.com/your say. But first is your headlines, and it's Aaron Armstrong.
Very good afternoon to you. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Well, as you've just been hearing, Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico has been shot following a government meeting in Handlova, a town outside the capital, Bratislava. This is the moment the Prime Minister was bundled into the car after being shot. Witnesses in the area said they heard several shots before a man was detained by police. The Slovakian president has condemned what he's described as a brutal attack and has wished Robert Fico a speedy recovery. This is, of course, a developing story. More as we get it here at GB News. Sir Keir Starmer used all 6 questions at today's PMQs to grill Rishi Sunak about overcrowded prisons as emergency measures were triggered to deal with the problem in England. It means defendants in police custody remain there and won't be transferred to courts for bail hearings. Now, the Labour leader referenced a recent report which says high-risk prisoners are being released up to 70 days early at short notice without sufficient planning. On Monday, the Prime Minister suggested Labour can't be trusted with national security.
The early release of stalkers, domestic abusers and those considered a risk to children sound like the work of someone who is making the country more secure.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said, no one should be put on this scheme if they are a threat to the public. And let me be crystal clear, it does not apply. Let me be absolutely clear, it does not apply to anyone serving a life sentence, anyone convicted of a serious violent offence, anyone convicted of terrorism, anyone convicted of a sex offence. And crucially, in contrast to the system that Labour had put in place, Mr. Speaker, governors in the prison service have an absolute lock so that no one is put on the scheme who shouldn't be.
The government's also suggested police could make more use of existing stop and search powers as part of new measures to tackle knife crime. The searches were curbed a decade ago by then Home Secretary Theresa May after it was found minorities were being disproportionately targeted. £3.5 million will be invested into developing new technology which could help police detect suspects carrying knives by scanning them from a distance. New proposals could see schools in England banned from teaching students about gender identity. The government's review would also see all sex education halted for children under the age of 9. The Prime Minister ordered a review into relationships, sex and health education last year over concerns some kids are being exposed to inappropriate content. The report suggests parents will be provided samples of sex education before lessons can take place. A Red Notice search warrant has been issued for an escaped French prisoner. Interpol have sent it out. 30-year-old Mohamed Amra, also known as The Fly, escaped from a prison van in northern France yesterday, sparking a major manhunt. He was broken free by gunmen in an ambush that killed 2 prison guards. More food parcels were handed out over the past year than ever before. The Trussell Trust says it donated more than 3 million emergency packages in the year to the end of March, as the cost of living puts more households under strain. More than 1 million of those were for children, and the overall total's doubled in just 5 years. The Trust is calling on the government to tackle long-term deficiencies in the welfare system. The mother of Barnaby Webber, who was stabbed and killed in Nottingham last year, has told GB News she feels the killer's sentence was the result of a flawed and weak police investigation. Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley Kumar and Ian Coates were killed last June by Valdo Calacane. The 32-year-old, who suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, was given an indefinite hospital order. Emma Webber says the case has revealed weaknesses in the legal system.
We were not expecting anything other than the outcome yesterday. I think we've hopefully made it very clear that all 3 families united do not accept the plea of diminished responsibility, so therefore manslaughter, alongside the attempted murder charges. And we feel it's the result of a very, very flawed and failed police investigation and a weak CPS prosecution from the East Midlands and an utter over-reliance upon doctors' reports.
GB News can reveal the number of people crossing the Channel's increased by 40% this year after an apparent switch in people smuggling tactics. Sources say criminal gangs are now pushing out fewer boats at any one time, but more often in a bid to avoid French beach patrols. It's resulted in almost a fortnight of continued migrant activity when boats were launched from the French coast every day over the past 12 days. Well, for the latest on our stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. The QR code's on your screen. The details are also on the website. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Aaron. Now to some breaking news. The Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico has been shot and wounded. Mr Fico was shot in front of a cultural community centre in a town named Handlover, where a government meeting had just been held. Several shots were heard and the Slovak leader has been taken to hospital and his alleged assailant has been detained by the police. Well, joining us now for a full update is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, a dramatic scene. What's the latest? What do we know about Robert Fico's politics? Do we know anything at all about his would-be assailant?
Not at this stage, but as we tell you about the events that unfolded, we can show you some video, the dramatic moments just after he was shot in the abdomen. You can see him being bundled into one of the security vehicles there by his close protection detail and taken off to hospital. We know that he was treated initially at the hospital in this town of Handlova, where he was stabilised, according to medics. He is in a serious condition, but they've managed to stabilise him. He's now, we're told, being transferred to a major trauma centre by helicopter, where it's believed he will be operated on arrival at that major trauma centre. No details on who the assailant was, but reports locally suggesting that someone had shouted, "Robbo, come here," I would imagine in the local language, to the Prime Minister, who was in the process of meeting and greeting members of the public after this governmental meeting at a community centre in Handlova when the shooting happened. And as I say, the reports are that he was shot in the abdomen and in the hand as well. He collapsed to the ground. He was quickly scooped up by his close security detail and put into the back of that vehicle, driven initially to the local hospital and then airlifted, as I say, to this major trauma centre. We've had reaction from politicians around the globe, as you would imagine. The latest from Prime Minister Rishi Sunak here in the UK, saying that he is shocked by the awful news coming out of Slovakia, and his thoughts are with Prime Minister Fico and his family at this time. We're looking at images as well taken immediately in the aftermath of the shooting that show the suspect on the ground, hands bound behind his back as the police deal with this man. And as I say, the fact that he is alive and well in terms of the suspect means that they will at least be able to speak to him, providing he's cooperative, and get an idea, an indication of what the motivation, Martin, was for this, what the government say was an attempted assassination.
And incredible images there, Mark White, of the Prime Minister literally being bundled into the back of an official vehicle by his detail, as you say, and being taken to hospital. I mean, incredible pictures. Do we know anything about his political background and how that may have influenced this event today? He's rumoured to be a pro-Russian, a populist, and we've seen, of course, in Tbilisi yesterday, rumours of the Kremlin involved there. Some disruption in states out there, Mark. Do we think there's anything connected to that potentially and the Ukraine situation?
Well, it's certainly possible. He is not without controversy, as you alluded to there. He is actually Slovakia's longest-serving Prime Minister in terms of the fact that he'd served 3 terms previously before becoming, not winning outright, but becoming the biggest party in the elections in Slovakia in September of last year. The president asked him to form a coalition government, which he did, but really within months of that coalition government coming to power, he ceased the funding that Slovakia was giving, the aid that that country was giving to Ukraine. And you're right, he has, he's seen as an ally of Putin, also an ally and friends of Viktor Orban in Hungary, who's been reacting this afternoon, saying that he is deeply shocked and outraged by this assassination attempt on his friend and ally in Slovakia. So, as I say, not a man without controversy at all. In fact, the latest controversial government policy of his is to dismantle their state broadcaster, their equivalent of the BBC, the government in the process of trying to do that. So a lot of controversy swirling around this man and his government at the moment, but we don't know, Martin, what the motivation for this attempted assassination was. Just that the Prime Minister at this hour is in hospital, likely in the operating theatres as we speak.
Astonishing pictures, a knife-edge situation and a comprehensive roundup there, Mark White. Thank you very much. And, of course, we'll cross back to you throughout the show as and when more details emerge on the attempted assassination of Robert Fico, the Slovakian Prime Minister. Thank you, Mark White. Now, moving on, because early today, the two main political parties clashed over their records on crime. Keir Starmer challenged the Prime Minister at PMQs on the early release of criminals under a scheme that was aimed at easing overcrowding in jails.
I am disappointed to see that version 7.0 of his time in office doesn't extend as far as answering questions or giving any information on those prisoners he is releasing early. Basic details like how many, where are they, what crimes have they committed. So will he at least guarantee that none of the criminals he is instructing prisoners to release early are considered high risk?
Mr. Speaker, there are strict eligibility criteria in place with exclusions based on public safety, and no one would be put on the scheme if they were deemed a threat to public safety.
High drama earlier. This comes, of course, as the government is telling the police that they must use their stop and search powers to tackle knife crime rather than to do what they say is to appease campaign groups who claim that the method is discriminatory. Well, Policing Minister Chris Philp says that stop and search is a vital tool in helping remove knives off the streets, but is concerned that it is not being used often enough by police. Well, to pick over all of this, I'm joined in the studio by GBNews' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, welcome to the studio. Of course, you covered PMQs today. It was a dramatic exchange. The Tory party started off on a front foot, getting tough on stop and search, promising to stamp out knife crime. But then it was Sir Keir Starmer who, in a sense, went for the kill at PMQs, and he was often referred to historically as forensic. Got to be said today, he was very forensic. He went for him.
Yeah, I think it's a one-all score draw, I think. Now, you had Chris Philp, the policing minister, on GB News earlier saying how he wants stop and search to be increased. Numbers have fallen from 1.2 million in 2010-11 to just 279,000 stop and search incidents in England and Wales in those 8 years, the first 8 years of the last decade. That's because it'd be concerned because black people have been 5 times more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. That has raised concerns about community tensions. The Tories want the police to be more on the front foot on stop and search. If someone is suspicious, stop them, search them is what it means. You've heard that from Chris Philp. Even Mark Rowley, the new Met Police Chief, he's quite keen on it. Labour are divided, though. We hear from Yvette Cooper saying they want it can be done in an effective way and is an extremely important tool. Sadiq Khan, in charge of the Met Police and the biggest force in the country by some margin, he's very sceptical, saying that he'll do all in his power to further cut out its use. So a debate there, which the Tories might have won, but on early release, the Tories are in some trouble. The jails are 99% full. We are seeing numbers being released in volume early from these numbers of criminals. The question that the Keir Starmer asked as a former prosecutor 6 times, who are you releasing? Are they committing crimes? And only towards the end did we hear a response from Sir Keir Starmer. He said that there are no prisoners to be released who will pose any risk to the public. Bookmark that line, Martin. Bookmark it, because if anyone who is early released now goes on to offend in a bad way or a serious way, or if the wrong person who is released, as can happen, it'll be on Rishi Sunak and what he said in the House of Commons. And Labour will say, come back and apologise to this House. It's difficult. I should say also there's a thing called the Sentencing Bill. The government wants to stop jailing anybody for less than a year. You know how difficult that is. I've asked the PM directly when he talks about other measures to cut down. You're not going to jail them, so why are you saying you want to jail them for 6 months? It's not going to jail them at all. So I think this space of early release is a weakness for the PM.
Last week it was defence. This week it's law and order. But we have a more dramatic situation ourselves here tonight because, of course, Last night, Jacob Rees-Mogg was locking horns with Ben Habib, of course, deputy leader of the Reform Party, and he said he would welcome Ben Habib, he would welcome Richard Tice, he would welcome Nigel Farage into the Reform Party. In fact, he said, I'd recommend this to the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Well, tonight, in this precise studio, the two godfathers will meet. Do you think there could be what a lot of people would like to see happen, a dramatic coming together of the two families?
The godfathers being Jacob Rees-Mogg and Nigel Farage.
Correct.
Meeting in this studio.
Right, yeah.
Are the viewers ready for that?
They should be, because Jacob is rolling out the red carpet. It seems like he wants it to happen. Now, Nigel might say this plan can go and swim with the fishers.
He will, and that's what I think Richard Tice, the Reform leader, has said so. Nigel Farage is not a politician. He's a presenter on GB News. He is honorary president of Reform UK. Speculation about whether he might re-emerge to fight maybe Clacton in September, October, ahead of the November election. He's keeping his powder dry. Rees-Mogg has no real power nationally anymore in the party. He has supporters in the grassroots, but nothing more than that. But he's saying what I think many Tory MPs are saying privately: you need to work with Reform UK, not against them, to ensure that right-wing split isn't split, and you've got a chance to beat the Labour. You can see why he's saying it, but I'm not sure it's going to happen, Martin.
OK, well, the two godfathers of the right will meet in this studio. In fact, in these two chairs later on.
Keep them warm.
Let's see what happens. Keep them peeled. Chris Hope, always a pleasure. Thank you very much. Now, back to that conversation on stop and search, because joining me now is the retired Metropolitan Police Officer, Chris Hobbs. Chris, welcome to the studio. You're an excellent guest on this. You say it as you see it. Let's start with the basics. Stop and search works, doesn't it? You know, you've done it. Tell us the figures.
Well, it does, and overall, I think it's still going on. And on average, the Met take in London, they take about between 300 and 400 weapons off the streets every month by virtue of stop and search. So it is a very useful power. There's something like 12,000, 13,000 knife crimes in London every year. Over 3,000, almost 4,000 hospital admissions nationally. And that's not being patched up in A&E, that's being admitted as a result of knife crime. There's a huge problem with gangs in certain parts of the country, especially Birmingham and especially London. And of course, the other thing to bear in mind, a lot of knife crime, a lot of stabbings never appear in police records. If it doesn't require a hospital admission or if there's not an arrest, there's an awful lot of stabbings that go on that will never see the light of day. But you can find them on gang social media, on gang, wait for it, news channels, believe it or not, and on gang documentaries. So it's a huge problem. As far as police are concerned, yes, they have been stepping back, because it was only a few years ago that Theresa May and David Cameron were criticising police for carrying out stop and search. Now you've got a situation where a contentious stop and search for a police officer, someone kicks off in the street, they're being stop and searched, a crowd gathers, a complaint is made. That officer then faces a career-ending disciplinary process that could go on for months or even years. So it's more a case, A, of giving officers confidence, and secondly, with the demands on police, huge as they are, it's actually being able to get officers out there proactively looking for these crimes, because at the moment they're drowning under a sea of bureaucracy, are still doing hospital guards, still doing scene guards. If they arrest someone, they're basically finished for the rest of their shift because of the paperwork involved. So officers at the sharp end are facing a bit of a nightmare.
Chris Philp, the policing minister today, has urged police not to stop bowing to pressure groups. Of course, they claim stop and search is racist. A quick look at the data. Black men are 6 times more likely to be stopped, but black men are 4.5 times more likely to stab somebody to death. They are 3.5 times more likely to be stabbed to death per head of population. It's fair to say the figures actually reflect the crime data. Stop and search isn't racist in that sense, is it? It's merely targeted policing. What's your take on that?
Well, for a start, I mean, police officers, when they're called to a stabbing, they don't know what they're going to confront. They don't know whether they're going to be facing a knifement. They don't know, and activist groups will remember this, whether they'll be performing life-saving first aid on the victim, which, again, they're often there before paramedics, and they save lives, often young black lives. We do know, don't we, that this sort of crime goes on in relatively deprived areas. And if you look at knife crime statistics, that's where they occur. Whose fault is that? That isn't the police's fault. That's generations of politicians on both sides of the divide. The police are providing the sticking plaster and are really doing their best to stop people, and in parts of London, young black men, from being stabbed and being killed. And sometimes it's not just stabbings, it's shootings, and there is a tremendous gang problem in London. But of course, it's a stick that's easy to beat police officers with, and if you get a complaint of racism on your record, even if it turns out there's no further actions, or you're basically found not guilty by the process, that stays on your record. And if you get, say, 3 of them, and it's happening now, 3 complaints, and officers who are getting 3 complaints are getting re-vetted. So they've got to worry about, again, am I going to lose my job because of this stop and search? But you also need...
Chris Hobbs, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time. You're a font of knowledge. Always a delight to talk to you. Thank you very much for coming on. Now, there's plenty more to come on the show, including all the very latest as illegal crossings surge by an astonishing 40% as people smugglers change their tactics. We'll get all the details of how they're doing that a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
What do you think of Sophie of Edinburgh? You know, how has she accounted for herself? How's she coming across? And has she been anointed by Charles?
Well, first of all, I just want to confirm that I'm your favourite Schofield, because that was alarming to me to see that Kevin Schofield was also appearing on the programme.
Well, it's an awful name for me, believe me. You know.
David, all right. Well,
never
I
even
do
think of you like that. You're just Kinsey to me.
That's wonderful. Excuse me. I think Sophie has been coined the royal family's secret weapon as of late. Her path was not the easiest one, but she's living proof that patience is a virtue, and if you work hard and stay focused, your time to shine will come. You know, she was under immediate scrutiny when she hit the scene because she was a self-made career woman, a young woman who was incredibly successful. She was a commoner. And, you know, she looked so similar to Princess Diana when she was younger. So they were constantly pit against each other when it came to beauty and fashion. You know, she tried and failed the half in, half out route. But unlike, you know, who, she ultimately chose the family. And despite some of that chaos, she was rewarded for her loyalty. So absolutely, I think that the king very much believes in the Duchess of Edinburgh, is so grateful for her contribution, and we saw real leadership with her today.
Interesting, Kinsey, to see that she actually bumped the Prince and Princess of Wales off the front of some of the newspapers this morning. She made it onto the front of the Telegraph, whereas it was the brand new picture that we haven't seen to mark their wedding anniversary that's made it onto the front of the Times. And I suppose that shows, you know, how significant that visit is and how prominent she's becoming.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 3:26, and let's get more now on the breaking news on the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, who has been shot and wounded. And I'm joined again by GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White. Mark, do we have any more information on this dramatic attempted assassination?
Yeah, we just heard from the government in Slovakia with some worrying news suggesting that the Prime Minister is in a life-threatening condition. Clearly, there were very serious concerns about the state of his medical condition, given that he had been shot a number of times in the abdomen. We'd been told that he had gone to the local hospital in this town, which is about 100 miles from the Slovakian capital, Bratislava. He was stabilised at this hospital, but then the decision was taken to fly him to a major trauma centre where he is undergoing an operation for those abdominal wounds that he suffered in this shooting. But the official word from the government in Slovakia is that their Prime Minister is in a life-threatening condition. You can see there from the latest images that we've been getting in, the crowd around the main suspect, who is on the ground in these images. Other images showing the Prime Minister, of course, being bundled away, scooped up by his security team and taken into that armoured vehicle for transportation to the hospital. We don't know as yet who the suspect is. That official word certainly has not come out from the authorities in Slovakia as yet, but he is alive and apparently uninjured from certainly the images that we've seen of him there on the ground in handcuffs as he's about to be taken away by the police and security services. So we don't know at this stage what the motivation for what the government say was an attempted assassination was. But this is a Prime Minister who is not without controversy. He is someone who, within months of taking power, for the fourth time actually as Prime Minister, the longest serving Prime Minister, when his 3 previous terms in office have been added up, more than a decade in power in that country. But within months of taking power as part of a coalition, he announced an immediate suspension of all aid to Ukraine, and just in recent days he has set about moves to start dismantling the state broadcaster in Slovakia.
Yeah, Mark White, thank you for that update. And for those of you just joining us, the news is Robert Fico, the Slovakian Prime Minister, is in a life-threatening situation after an earlier assassination attempt. The assailant is in custody. Thank you, Mark White. Now, as the country prepares to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day on the 6th of June, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission's torch of commemoration has been in Oxford today. The ceremony is designed to engage younger people and inspire them to play their part in marking the sacrifices of the fallen. Well, joining me now is our reporter, Charlie Peters, who's in Oxford, where they're holding a torch-lighting ceremony ahead of the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Charlie, welcome to the show. The sun is shining down on you and a magnificent moment to be marked.
That's right, Martin, and it's part of the Commonwealth War Grave Commission's Lighting Their Legacy campaign. There are 14 torches on this procession, lasting 3 weeks until the 5th of June, which is the eve of D-Day, which will be marked on June the 6th, representing 80 years since the largest amphibious invasion, which marked a turn in the Second World War, where France was liberated and the Allied victory over the Western Front followed soon after. And here in Botley in Oxfordshire, many of those 14 nationalities are represented in this cemetery. The only Greek soldier to be buried in Britain is here. There are also South Africans, Canadians, hundreds of Britons, and also those from the Italian and German armies. But the reason why the Commission is so keen on education as part of this process, this roadshow will be touring all over the United Kingdom, all 4 corners over the next few weeks. They're so keen on education because in stunning new research, they found that 1 in 10 Britons do not know what D-Day is. They also found that 1 in 5 younger Britons, aged 18 to 24, also don't know what D-Day is. They also found that a third of people who do know don't also understand the significance of the event and its standing as a moment of a turning point in the war. Well, earlier today, I went to ask some local people here in Oxford, did they know what D-Day was?
I think it's really brave what they managed to do all those years ago. It's absolutely amazing, and I definitely think it's worth celebrating because they did so much for us. The least we can do is have one day for them.
D-Day, that's like the end of World War II, isn't it? 1944. That's like the end of World War II. I don't really know much about it. I used to know a bit, but not anymore.
The end of the war.
That's VE Day.
I don't know then.
It's the 80th anniversary next month. It was when the Allies landed at Normandy.
Okay.
Do you know what D-Day is?
No.
No.
Well, Charlie Peters, thanks for joining us. A magnificent moment, but we could do with some better education around D-Day, couldn't we? Dear oh dear. Anyway, plenty more to bring you throughout the show, including all the latest from Slovakia. But first, your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico has been shot after a government meeting in Handlover outside the capital, Bratislava. This is the moment the Prime Minister was bundled into a car after being shot. He's reportedly now in a life-threatening condition. Witnesses in the area say they heard several shots before a man was detained by police. Slovakia's president condemned what he described as a brutal attack and wished Robert Fico a speedy recovery. We'll bring you more on this story as we get it. The government has also suggested police could make more use of existing stop and search powers as part of new measures to tackle knife crime. The searches were curbed a decade ago by then Home Secretary Theresa May after it was found minorities were being disproportionately targeted. £3.5 million will be invested into developing new technology, which could help police detect suspects carrying knives by scanning them from a distance. New proposals could see schools in England banned from teaching students about gender identity. The government's review would also see all sex education halted for children under the age of 9. The Prime Minister ordered a review into relationships, sex and health education last year over concerns some children were being exposed to inappropriate content. A red notice search warrant for an escaped French prisoner has been issued by Interpol. 30-year-old Mohamed Amra, also known as The Fly, escaped from a prison van in northern France yesterday, sparking a major manhunt. He was broken free by gunmen in an ambush that killed 2 prison guards. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. There's plenty more to bring you throughout the show. But first, there's a brand new way to get in touch with us here at GB News. And here's Bev Turner with all of the details.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, West Yorkshire. The eastbound M62 struggling just after Chain Bar Junction 26. There's a shed load, so its queuing and 2 lanes are currently coned off there. In the West Midlands, the southbound M42 at the turn off of Birmingham Airport and Coventry to Junction 6. A lane shut very slow as emergency barrier repairs continue there. Now there's queues northbound up the M1 up towards Luton Airport Spur Road, turn off Junction 10. There was a breakdown, that's cleared now. I can see all lanes open on the cameras, but still a legacy of congestion. And 2 lanes shut eastbound for the M27 in Hampshire at the turn off of Hedge End Junction 7 in the roadworks. There's emergency manhole cover repairs underway. It's queuing on that eastbound side back towards Southampton Airport there at Junction 5 this afternoon. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
We've got some good news. Because the King will return to public life, we think he's going to carry out some duties tomorrow.
Wow. And with just a week to go before Prince Harry visits the UK to mark the 10th anniversary of the Invictus Games, could the family see a reunion? Ingrid Stewart, Editor-in-Chief of Majesty Magazine, joins us now. Good morning, Ingrid. Lovely to see you. Sometimes with feuding families, it takes an unexpected and potentially life-changing event to bring them together. Are we going to see that now?
I don't think we're going to see William and Harry together, but I do think that King Charles will make an effort to see his son. He'll want to see him. They'll both be in London at the same time, I believe, because it's the Prime Minister's meeting. So there is no real reason why Harry shouldn't see his father. But, you know, for William, it's a bit different. So maybe they'll get together, but I would only be guessing. And my guess is that they probably won't.
Invictus Games, Ingrid, it has been a great triumph for Prince Harry. We shouldn't take that away from him. It'll be fascinating because he's going to be at that service, I think, at St Paul's next week to mark the 10th anniversary of the Invictus Games. Will it be odd if there is no other member of the royal family there? Because that's what I'm hearing. There'll be no royals there at all apart from Harry.
I also heard the same thing. I gather that the actor Damon Lewis is actually reading the poem Invictus. And I think that Harry will probably want to, you know, to take the main stage himself. This is his baby, as if it were, and it's something he's worked at very hard, and perhaps one could say one of his few successes. So I think he will want to claim the high ground.
Welcome back. It's 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. And throughout the show, we'll be continuing to bring you all the latest on the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, who was shot and wounded earlier today, and he is now in a life-threatening condition. Now, new data reveals that 3.1 million emergency food parcels were provided to people facing hardship between April 2023 and March 2024, more than ever seen before. And the Labour Party say this is a result of 14 years of Tory misery. But is that the case? Or are food banks being abused by some people who don't really need them? Well, joining me now from a food bank in Stoke is GB News reporter Jack Carson. Jack, welcome to the show. So what's the situation on the ground in Stoke? Tell us more.
Well, of course, these figures from the Trussell Trust this morning, Martin, really shocking. Of course, as you were mentioning, more than 3 million emergency food parcels delivered in the year to March. That's a 94% increase over the past 5 years. And just to get the perspective, really, of what it's like on the front line here with Jane from the Newcastle Staff's Food Bank here. I mean, just kind of tell us your reaction to those figures this morning and kind of what you're seeing here at the food bank.
It's really sad to see another rise in the figures. Nobody should have to depend on a charity to put food on the table. So we're sadly in that situation where the numbers have gone up yet again. Here in Newcastle Staffs, we've given out over 9,600 parcels in the last year. We're at a 9% increase on the previous year and 113% increase in the last 5 years.
So why do you think you're kind of seeing that increase, and what kind of people are you seeing come to the food bank? Is it people with young families? Is it older people? What are you seeing?
About 2/3 of the people are with young families, but we're also seeing an increase in the number of pensioners needing our support. Anyone and everyone can be finding themselves in need of support from the food bank. There's not a particular group of people that we're seeing more often than others. It can be a whole range of people.
And of course, part of the data is that more than 1 million parcels were delivered to children. I mean, you know, Labour have got this plan of free breakfast clubs in every school if they were to get into government at the next election. I mean, hearing that kind of policy, is that something you think would help? Do you think it solves the problem? What more actually do you need to see? Do you feel like as someone that works on the front line to actually try and solve this problem? Because I guess the ultimate aim really is to render yourselves useless, to kind of not exist if it's a perfect world.
Exactly. In a perfect world, I'd love to be out of a job. A breakfast club will help, but there are 3 meals in a day, so we don't feel that that goes far enough. People come to the food bank because they haven't got enough money to buy food. So anything that can be a long-term solution to raising that income for them. The Trust are calling for an essentials guarantee. At the moment, the social security system does not cover the essentials. We only give out basic food parcels. There's nothing extravagant. People can't afford the basics. So anything, we're calling all political leaders to come up with a plan. They can't ignore this problem now.
I mean, when we talk about essentials, what kind of are we talking about? Because we've got all kinds of things around us here. We've got obviously tins of beans, we've got pasta, but we've also got things like nappies as well.
Yeah, I mean, we try and put 3 meals a day for 3 days into a food parcel for however many people are in the household. But we also supply toiletries, so shampoo, shower gel, nappies for those with babies, baby wipes, things like that. People can't afford things.
Jane, thank you so much for joining us on the show this afternoon. I mean, that's just a picture really on the front line, Martin, with these latest Trussell Trust figures.
Okay, thank you very much, Jack Carlson, and great work there, Jane Baker in Stoke. Please pass on our great regards for the fantastic work that Jane is doing. Now, don't go anywhere. We'll be bringing you all the latest on the Slovakian Prime Minister, of course, Robert Fico, who was shot and wounded and is presently in a life-threatening condition. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, will bring us all of the latest on this breaking story. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Many places seeing a bit of sunshine today, but for some it's pretty drab over parts of northern and eastern England. Highest temperatures to the north of this weather front across northern Scotland. Low pressure down to the southwest, generating some showers for Devon and Cornwall. And this weather front is that cloudier zone, pretty drab over much of northern England and eastern England. Rain and drizzle on and off here, and maybe some heavier showers over the Midlands later. But much of Wales, southeast England, dry and bright with some sunshine and plenty of sunshine across northern Scotland. Here, temperatures in some places getting up into the low to maybe mid-20s, but much cooler on the east coast with some mist and low clouds sticking around here. Feeling quite warm in the sunny spells over parts of the Midlands, southeast England this afternoon, and a pretty pleasant evening to come here. The showers in the southwest, 1 or 2 heavy ones for Devon and Cornwall, but pretty well scattered. Many areas here staying dry. 1 or 2 scattered showers across Northern Ireland too. There's that cloudier zone over northern England, although parts of the far north of England should brighten up with some sunny spells in the north of Scotland. Temperatures getting and staying in the 20s even into this evening, but much cooler with that ha on the east coast, which will tend to come and go and keep things fairly misty. Some of that mist and low clouds sticking across eastern Scotland overnight. The rain and drizzle tending to fizzle out further over northern England, but later in the night, chance of a bit more rain returning to parts of East Anglia. For many, it's a dry night, some mist and fog possible in the south. Temperatures mostly holding up in double digits, just a little cooler compared to recent nights in northern Scotland. On to Thursday, and it's looking like a pretty drab day again over parts of East Anglia and Lincolnshire. Rain and drizzle returning here and then spreading back into parts of the Midlands and North Wales later. Further south, some brightness, then some heavy showers breaking out. Could be some thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon. Again, largely dry in Scotland with the highest temperatures once more in the far northwest. Bye for now.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:46. And let's get more now on the breaking news on the Slovakian Prime Minister, Robert Fico, who is in a life-threatening condition after being shot earlier on. Now, joining us now is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, when you last joined us, you broke that news that the situation appears to be more grave for Robert Fico. Do we know anything else?
Well, reports that he is in a critical condition, having been treated at a local hospital in this town about 100 miles from Bratislava. There you can see the images of the Prime Minister being bundled into that security car before being taken to the local hospital. He has now been airlifted to a major trauma centre in a nearby town where he is undergoing surgery, but according to local officials, he is described as being in a life-threatening condition. We've got some more new video, as you can imagine, bits and pieces coming in all the time on this story, Martin. We've got some more video that shows the arrest of the main suspect, and that, as the camera sort of rushes towards that wall, and over the wall you can see that man having been wrestled to the ground by police and security services before being handcuffed and taken away. We don't know at this stage, Martin, what the motivation for the shooting of Robert Fico was, only that apparently this man had shouted towards the Prime Minister, shouting, "Robbo, come over here," which the Prime Minister probably obliged, because what was apparently happening was a meet and greet, as politicians will often do. You can see the barriers in those images that were set up for crowd control. So clearly in this town they were expecting their Prime Minister and members of the government to attend this meeting at a local cultural centre, and afterwards the Prime Minister was involved, we understand, in a meet and greet with members of the public. Always the most difficult and worrying of times for anyone involved in close protection duties, Martin, because it's at that point where you're face to face with members of the public, and while indoors at an event you can at least put some level of security in to try to get a handle on who's coming in to these premises and perhaps search them and put them through metal detectors and alike. It's much more difficult to do that in a public street. As I say, there were crowd control barriers and members of the police and security services there. But if someone has a gun hidden about their person, it's just a matter of a second or so before they've got that weapon out and opening fire. And really, you have to be right on top of someone to be able to react in enough time to stop them doing any serious harm. And we know that this Prime Minister, Fico, now has suffered serious harm, because according to his own officials, he is in a life-threatening condition at this hour.
And Mark, we clearly have footage there of the would-be assassin being apprehended. No doubt he would go through some thorough questioning. Without speculating, do we know anything about Mr. Fico's politics or background that may give us a clue as to the kind of enemies he may have made? He's a pro-Russian, right? He's a populist, former Communist Party member. Do you know anything else about him in a more recent manner, which may give us some indication as to possible motives?
Well, he's certainly a divisive figure, there's no doubt about that. And he is someone with a long political history in this country. And as such, any politician who served in office, even though it was on and off over probably 10 years, over a number of times heading that country, you have political baggage. You have those who are opposed, even vehemently opposed to you and your policies. And we know that this Prime Minister in particular was seen as someone who was quite close and sympathetic to the Kremlin, someone who in opposition, when he was standing at the last set of elections, said one of the first things he would do when he got in power would be to immediately stop aid to Ukraine, and true to his word, within months of gaining power, a coalition, because he didn't win outright power, but in that coalition government, he put through legislation that stopped aid to Ukraine. He's also currently in the process of trying to dismantle the state broadcaster there. And he's a man, as I say, he's not been without controversy. In 2018, he was forced to resign because of the assassination, the murder of an investigative journalist in Slovakia, controversy surrounding him and accusations made against him at the time that forced him effectively out of office. But as I say, he's a long-standing politician who has been in and out of office, and now, of course, since October of last year, he has been back in office. However unpopular he might be with some sections of the country, he is the Prime Minister, the legitimate Prime Minister, and understandably politicians right around the world are expressing their shock and support for this Prime Minister and his family. Rishi Sunak is one of the latest to express his shock at the awful news coming out of Slovakia, and saying that his thoughts are with the Prime Minister and with his family.
And Mark White, the very fact that Robert Fico has had to be airlifted to a major trauma unit, it seems very concerning.
Yes, he was taken initially to the local area hospital in this town, about 100 miles from Bratislava. The doctors there had discussed sending him by helicopter to Bratislava, of course, where they will have the biggest and best equipped trauma centres, but apparently the decision was made that that journey would be too long given the critical condition, the precarious nature of the wounds that he'd suffered and the condition he was in. And so instead he was taken to another major trauma centre in a town that is just a bit closer to where this incident took place. So that's where he is at the moment, undergoing emergency surgery, and we await the outcome of that surgery and an update on his condition.
OK, Mark White, we have to leave it there, but of course we're coming back to you for more on that story. The Slovakian Prime Minister is in a life-threatening situation. Here's your weather first.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some sunny spells around tomorrow, but a greater chance of some heavy downpours across the south. Again, northern Scotland may well see the highest temperatures. Low pressure is dominating down to the southwest. This weather front providing a band of thicker cloud and some rain and drizzle over northern England, southern Scotland. That'll peter out, as will the heavy showers we've got scattered across parts of the Midlands through the early evening. So many of us will have a dry night. Quite murky and misty on the east coast, and in the south some thicker fog patches could form through the early hours as well, as temperatures drop to 11 to 12 Celsius. A little cooler in northern Scotland with some clearer skies here. On to Thursday, it is a bit of a messy one. Murky again on some eastern coasts, much of the south starting dry, but the likelihood of some showery rain pushing into parts of eastern England early doors. Any early morning mist and fog in the south should be clearing away by rush hour. Generally dry and bright for Wales and Northern Ireland. Some fine weather again across much of Scotland, although southern Scotland may well start a little dull and damp. And we will again have this breeze coming in from the east. That's going to make for some misty conditions again at times. On some of those eastern coasts could be a little bit of heart around. But again, for northwest Scotland, we should see plenty of sunny spells. Elsewhere, quite a lot of cloud for northern England and some showery rain working once more, initially into Lincolnshire and East Anglia, but then spreading across parts of the Midlands and later towards Wales. Some heavy showers likely across South Wales and southern England come the afternoon. In the brighter spells here, 20 degrees, 21, 22 in western Scotland, maybe a little higher along the Moray Firth, but cooler again on those North Sea coasts. And cooler where we've got this rainier zone, staying pretty wet across northwest England and North Wales into the evening. The outlook is for more sunshine and showers, but the showers fading through the weekend, many of us looking dry and fine for Sunday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boiler.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's big queues on the eastbound M62 this afternoon. Now, 2 lanes are shut just after Chain Bar at junction 26. There's a collision there, a trailer separated from a lorry. The queues to just before 24 Ainley Top. It's taking about 90 minutes to get through that stretch of the 2-lane closure at the moment. A lane shut on the southbound M42 at the turn off of Coventry and Birmingham Airport at junction 6. There's queues back to Coleshill at junction 7. That inside lane is closed off for emergency barrier repairs. Somerset and the southbound M5, Clevedon down to Western Supermare, junction 20 to 21's part blocked and queuing. That's at the scene of a collision. And 2 lanes shut eastbound on the M27 at Hedge End, junction 7. There's emergency repairs in the roadworks, queuing back towards Southampton Airport at junction 5. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing. Just go for it. It's an absolute must. You must try and go for it.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Hey, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico is in a life-threatening condition after being shot and wounded. Mr. Fico was attacked in front of a cultural community centre in the town where a government meeting was being held. We'll have all the latest on this attempted assassination. And the policing minister has demanded that police must increase their use of stop and search to tackle the scourge of knife crime and stop bowing to campaign groups who slam it as racist. I'll speak to a mother and a grandmother who lost loved ones to knife crime later in the show. And food bank users are at an all-time high with a 94% increase in 5 years. Now, the Labour Party say this is a result of 14 years of Tory misery. But is that the case, or are they being abused by some people who don't actually need them? Well, that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Thanks for your company. Always a delight. We've got a huge breaking story. Of course, Robert Fico, the Slovakian Prime Minister, an attempted assassination. He's critically injured, critically ill, been airlifted to a hospital for life-saving treatment. We'll have a full update on that. Plus, later in the show, I'll be asking you about food banks. There's been a huge increase in their use. Earlier on in the show, I asked you, do you know anybody out there who abuses food banks, or are they all worthy causes? Well, I've got hundreds of your says in on this topic already, and it's fair to say there's some pretty spicy content. I'll read some of that out later in the show. You get your comments in this way, gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, it's time for your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories, as you've been hearing, this breaking news that Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico is in a critical condition after he was shot following a government meeting in Handlover outside the capital, Bratislava. This is the moment the Prime Minister was bundled into a car after he was shot. He was then airlifted to hospital where his condition is now life-threatening. Witnesses in the area said they heard several shots before a man was detained by police. Slovakia's president condemned the assassination attempt, describing it as a brutal attack. Mr Fico won power for a fourth time last October and has implemented more pro-Russian policies. He's pledged to stop military support for Ukraine and threatened to veto the country's membership in NATO. We'll bring you more on this developing story as we get it. In other news, Sir Keir Starmer used all 6 questions at today's Prime Minister's Questions to grill Rishi Sunak about overcrowded prisons as emergency measures were triggered to deal with the problem in England. It means defendants in police custody remain there and won't be transferred to courts for bail hearings. The Labour leader referenced a recent report which says high-risk prisoners are being released up to 70 days early at short notice without sufficient planning. On Monday, the Prime Minister suggested Labour can't be trusted with national security.
The early release of stalkers, domestic abusers and those considered a risk to children sound like the work of someone who is making the country more secure.
Mr Speaker, as I've said, no one should be put on this scheme if they are a threat to the public. And let me be crystal clear, it does not apply. And let me be absolutely clear, it does not apply to anyone serving a life sentence, anyone convicted of a serious violent offence, anyone convicted of terrorism, anyone convicted of a sex offence. And crucially, in contrast to the system that Labour had put in place, Mr Speaker, governors in the prison service have an absolute lock so that no one is put on the scheme who shouldn't be.
The government has suggested police could make more use of existing stop and search powers as part of new measures to tackle knife crime. The searches were curbed a decade ago by then Home Secretary Theresa May after it was found minorities were being disproportionately targeted. £3.5 million will be invested into developing new technology, which could help police detect suspects carrying knives by scanning them from a distance. New proposals could see schools in England banned from teaching students about gender identity. The government's review would also see all sex education halted for children under the age of 9. The Prime Minister ordered a review into relationships, sex and health education last year over concerns some children were being exposed to inappropriate content. Reports suggest parents will be provided samples of sex education content before lessons take place. A red notice search warrant for an escaped French prisoner has been issued by Interpol. 30-year-old Mohamed Amra, also known as The Fly, escaped from a prison van in northern France yesterday, sparking a major manhunt. He was broken free by gunmen in an ambush that killed 2 prison guards. More food parcels were handed out over the past year than ever before. The Trussell Trust says it donated more than 3 million emergency packages in the year to the end of March, as the cost of living puts more households under strain. More than 1 million of those were for children, and the overall total has almost doubled in just 5 years. The Trust is calling on the government to tackle long-term deficiencies in the welfare system. The mother of Barnaby Webber, who was stabbed and killed in Nottingham last year, has told GB News she feels the killer's sentence was the result of a flawed and weak police investigation. Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Coomer and Ian Coates were killed last June by Valdo Callicane. The 32-year-old, who suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, was given an indefinite hospital order. Emma Webber says the case has revealed weaknesses in the legal system.
We were not expecting anything other than the outcome yesterday. I think we've hopefully made it very clear that all three families united do not accept the plea of diminished responsibility, so therefore manslaughter, alongside the attempted murder charges. And we feel it's the result of a very, very flawed and failed police investigation and a weak CPS prosecution from the East Midlands, and an utter over-reliance upon doctors' reports.
For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. And let's get more on that breaking news story on the Slovakian Prime Minister, Robert Fico, who is in a life-threatening condition after being shot. And joining us now is GB News Homeland Security Editor Mark White. Mark, bring us up to speed. Clearly an attempted assassination, a life-threatening condition. What's the latest?
Well, we still await an update on what the Prime Minister's condition is. The last update we had about 45 minutes ago put that condition as critical and a life-threatening condition, treated initially in the local hospital in this town, about 100 miles from the capital, Bratislava. Then he was flown by air ambulance to another trauma centre, a larger trauma centre, better equipped. There were plans to transfer him to the capital, but it was thought that given the precarious nature of his medical condition, that it was just too far a journey even for a helicopter to make. I should say at this hour we're getting some news through now which is being reported widely in Slovakia from television, radio stations and newspapers in Slovakia, saying that the alleged attacker was a well-known Slovak writer, Juraj Čintula, who, according to local media, they say was a well-known activist of the Liberal Party, Progressive Slovakia. And again, according to these media reports being widely transmitted on radio, television and across newspapers in Slovakia, he had a registered weapon. We've not been able to independently confirm that, but we are just reporting on what the media in Slovakia is now widely reporting. This isn't just one outlet, it's right across this country, television and radio stations naming the suspected attacker as Juraj Čintula. They say he was a well-known Slovak writer and an activist for the Liberal Party, Progressive Slovakia. He is now in custody. The images there showing him on the ground with police and security services surrounding this man, taking him into custody. It will be very quickly apparent that that is the main suspect, I'm sure, when we get an official news conference from the officials in Slovakia. But as yet, of course, they're most concerned with the condition of their Prime Minister, who is in a life-threatening condition after having sustained, we're told, gunshot wounds to the abdomen, to an arm and to a leg as well. The images there of him being scooped up and bundled into that armoured limousine, taken off to the local hospital in this town, Handovla, which is just 100 miles from Bratislava, before now being transferred by an air ambulance to a larger trauma centre not far from this town.
And that is a significant development you just mentioned there, Mark White. If the local media reports are true, we were speculating earlier. This is the Prime Minister has a significant political heritage of being very pro-Russian, close links to the Kremlin, and you mentioned stopping aid to Ukraine, dismantling the state broadcaster. These are highly inflammatory things to people of a certain political persuasion, and a well-known writer, clearly with very different political leanings. Mark White, this is a dramatic development.
Yes, it is. I mean, as I say, he is a man not without controversy. The fact that he's served now, this is his fourth term in office. There's a lot of political baggage there, but he has viewpoints that, you know, many people in that country agree with, but of course many others don't. And when you have divisive political figures, they can be a target. And always of worry to anyone charged with protecting a VIP, like a leading politician, is the walkabouts when they can come face to face with members of the public, and those officers who will have been on his close security detail were on hand very quickly to wrestle this suspect to the ground. But really, you need lightning quick reaction. You need to be right next to someone when they're pulling out a weapon, really, to be in any way effective in stopping them causing serious harm. It is all over within a second or two, and that's certainly what the eyewitnesses reported. They said that this man shouted to the Prime Minister, "Robbo, come over here." And of course, the Prime Minister probably duly obliged as he was meeting members of the public. And then just within a second or two, 4 gunshots, according to eyewitnesses, rang out as the Prime Minister was shot in the abdomen, in the leg and in the arm, according to these reports.
And huge details when you look into, if it is true, Progressive Slovakia, a liberal and social liberal political party in Slovakia, established in 2017. The party is led by Michael Schumacher, a former vice president of the European Parliament. It's a member of the Renew Europe group. So clearly there's a political angle here. If this is true, Mark White, it would appear that potential flashpoint here is the very different political leanings between the Prime Minister, pro-Russia, pro-Kremlin, and this would-be assassin. If this is true, amazing stuff.
Well, indeed. Well, I mean, we're seeing, of course, in Slovakia, you've got, you know, scenes of unrest in Georgia. You've got unrest in Hungary with Viktor Orban, again, someone who's seen as a very divisive leader in that country. And you've got clear dividing lines, of course, with many of these leaders. And it can, you know, it can be seen along the lines of those who are pro-Kremlin, those who are leaning much more towards the European Union and to Ukraine, and that makes for, you know, a great deal of potential for those that are opposed to whatever the politician in power might direction they might be taking their country in, for them potentially to lead to violence. You know, political violence is not unknown. It's happened on multiple occasions throughout the years. And that's why, of course, these politicians are very closely guarded with their close security details. And they've had their election period there, but we're going into European elections. In this country, we're going very probably into an election later in the year. And politicians always, while they want to be accessible to the public, to the electorate, they take risks when they do that. In this country, too, politicians have come to harm. We should say that Robert Fico has now been transported to this larger trauma centre, Martin. It's the F.D. Roosevelt Faculty Hospital in Bangsa, Bystrica, which is not too far from this town where he was shot and critically injured.
Fantastic update there, Mark White. A dramatic situation. Thank you for that full update. And, of course, we'll cut back to you throughout the show as more details emerge. And I'm joined now in the studio by GBNews' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, what a situation. It has all the inklings of a politically motivated attack. What's the reaction been in the world of politics?
Yeah, it's coming in rapidly. We hear from the PM, Rishi Sunak. He says he's shocked to hear this awful news. All our thoughts are with the Prime Minister, Fisu, and his family. We're hearing from the Irish Prime Minister, Michael Martin. He's deeply shocked and appalled by the attack. A violent, reckless shooting is a direct attack on democracy itself. The Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas, saying that it's an assault on the very idea of democracy, and that is what this is. It is an assault on an elected leader of a European country. You've heard there from the Slovakian President-elect, Peter Pellegrini. He calls it a threat to democracy. And in an election year around the world, there's elections across the world, America, we know about the UK election coming up probably in the autumn. All security services across the world, we're watching this. How does this happen? It will cool down walkabouts. Mark White talked there about the risk also, always on the election trail when you go there. If this man was called over by somebody in the crowd, then you're going to have politicians going up there, shaking hands, greeting voters, trying to win a tight election. You can see it happening in the UK, and the threat to people will be alarming people who care about security and are protecting our politicians here in the UK.
And we're still waiting for verification, but Mark White, they're reporting that local media claiming the would-be assassin, a well-known writer and activist with the political party Progressive Slovakia, which is a pro-EU party. Juraj Gintula appears to be the name. We've yet to verify that in the West, but that is being reported locally. Chris Hope, thank you for that update. And joining me now is the Director of Communication and Policy at the Henry Jackson Society, Megan Gittos. Welcome, Megan, to the show. A hugely dramatic situation here, an attempted assassination of the Premier in Slovakia. What's your take on this?
As soon as I heard the news, of course, was hugely shocked. Political violence is increasing across the Western world and Europe, everywhere, really. And as in this year, particularly as the world almost goes to the polls, we should be quite concerned at this development. My initial thoughts were kind of similar to the reports that we're hearing just now. And was this due to the Prime Minister's pro-Russian stance? Politics in Slovakia is incredibly tense right now due to this. We have to remember that pro-Russian stance doesn't necessarily mean it's based on a moral argument on the Ukraine war, which is sometimes played out as it usually comes down to gas and a rejection of sanctions. And with that becomes heavy censorship on the behalf of the Kremlin. We're talking about sanctioning journalists, things like that. So politics in Slovakia are incredibly tense right now as a result of the heavy U-turn of Slovakia. We have to remember this is about a 5-year U-turn. It used to be very pro-Ukraine. So there is historical context here as well.
And Megan, when we look back at some of the policies and recent political moves of Robert Fico, he stopped aid to Ukraine in some recent legislation. He planned to dismantle this state broadcaster in Slovakia and also pledged to take Slovakia out of NATO, clearly not in alignment with Slovakia as a member of the European Union. These are all the opposite policy moves. And if the rumours, the speculation in local media are true, that the would-be assassin is a well-known political activist with very, very different political outtakes. Juraj Gintula, the name has been put forward locally from the Progressive Slovakia Party, a party with liberal and social liberal political backgrounds. They're very, very pro-European Union. In fact, Progressive Slovakia is a member of the Renew Europe group. Clearly, we have very, very different politics here coming to the bear.
Yeah, of course, a very different politics. Politics in this region can often be defined. It's not just Slovakia, it can often be defined as pro-EU and pro-Russia. Those are the two sides. You have it in Serbia, Georgia, as we see. And being pro-EU in these regions doesn't necessarily, it's not pro-EU like it would be in the UK. It's not a belief that it's this amazing institution. It's more the lesser of two evils. It's about not being so pro-Russia in a lot of circumstances. And I'd say that's why it's so tense in Slovakia. But of course, if reports are true and it's due to an alignment with a particular party, I can't imagine that things are going to be any better on that front. Probably will be more tense, more hostile. The PM is, of course, a minority leader. So he has a coalition government. There is diverse opinions in Slovakia. But of course, with what we're seeing with Georgia at the moment, being pro-Russia doesn't often mean just being anti-EU. It comes with a lot of censorship, and you are often at the hands of the Kremlin with policies, and there is immense fear that may continue in Slovakia. Of course, we have to wait for these reports to be confirmed, but there's protests all across the Balkans and Eastern Europe when it comes to be pro-Russian sentiments, and we've seen it increasing since the Ukraine war, as more of a fear that they might be next on Putin's radar.
And indeed, we saw yesterday in Tbilisi, the Georgian capital, protests about similar moves to clamp down on media, again with links to the Kremlin. But looking ahead, Megan, of course, in 3 weeks' time, we have European Union elections in Slovakia. Of course, Slovakia, a member of the EU, was one of those countries admitted in 2004. And this has a huge bearing on that. I mean, different parties will be standing on very different tickets in relation to the European Union. I mean, with those elections only 3 weeks ahead, could those elections be in jeopardy? Should they be allowed to go ahead with an attempted assassination on the cards?
I think that's a really good question. Should they be allowed to go ahead? I'm not sure that them not going ahead, in my personal opinion, I'm not sure them not going ahead would do a whole lot of good in the way the feeling would be in Slovakia right now. However, the campaign may take a pause and they may decide to delay it. And I'm not sure either of those decisions is wrong or right, but the impact this may have, I think it will definitely get people out of their houses to vote. Turnout for EU elections is not just poor in the UK, it's often poor across Europe and member states. So I think this would definitely get people out of their houses no matter when it was held, whether you were pro or anti the EU. It would certainly make you want to get your voice heard. What happened, of course, echo all world leaders right now. This is a horrific event, and no matter where you stand, we all have a lot at stake if we don't condemn political violence of this nature. Regardless of where you stand, political violence is a form of censorship. So it should be a reminder to everyone at what's at stake. Should this kind of trend continue?
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us, Megan Gittos, who's the Director of Communication and Policy at the Henry Jackson Society. And, of course, we'll keep you up to date on that attempted assassination on the Slovakian Prime Minister throughout the show. We'll be back after this break.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tough the last few years. Sam Richardson is a singer-songwriter from St Agnes in Cornwall. Much of his music reflects a sense of frustration with life in a coastal town.
We've got a lot of empty shops in a lot of our town centres, which is sort of causing a lot of death on the high street. I know that's a problem everywhere.
Similar problems across the border in Devon. Ilfracombe is the most deprived area in North Devon. Twice the town has applied for levelling up funding. Twice it's been turned down, something North Devon MP Selane Saxby says is frustrating.
It's very complicated. It's not as straightforward as just throwing money at the problem. They're very deep issues.
For several years, the government has acknowledged that rural areas need extra help, but so far that help doesn't stretch to our coasts. The MP for St Austell and Newquay is pushing the government to change all this.
Truly local people
are finding it really challenging because we often have sort of low wage seasonal work, but very high house prices pushed up because of second homes and holiday lets, etc. And also, I think the disparity review that Theresa May carried out when she was Prime Minister highlighted that working class white boys in coastal communities are some of the most disadvantaged people in the country.
Struggling to get on the housing ladder, struggling to find work, struggling to be heard.
It's interesting that a member of the party that's in government recognises that, which is great, because it is a really important thing. But that government, for the last 10 years, has also cut £500 million in youth services around the country.
No one thinks the problem of coastal deprivation can be solved overnight. The issue of disaffected young white males even harder.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:28. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, throughout the show, of course, we'll be bringing you all the latest as the Slovakian Prime Minister, Robert Fico, is now in critical condition following an assassination attempt. All the latest on this in just a moment. But moving on now, this comes as the government is telling the police in Britain that they must use their stop and search powers to stamp out knife crime, rather than to what they say is to appease campaign groups who claim that the method is discriminatory. The policing minister, Chris Philp, says it is a vital tool in helping remove knives off the streets, but is concerned that it is not being used often enough by police forces. Well, joining me now is reformed gang member and youth rehabilitator Sicarus McGraw. Welcome to the show. Delighted to have you on. So when you hear about the police increasing stop and search, what's your take on that? Is it a necessary tool or is it, as campaigners say, divisive?
Yeah, in my view, it's definitely a necessary tool. And in order to reduce knife crime, then it's one of the measures that need to be applied sooner rather than later.
And I mean, what experience did you have? Have you been stopped and searched yourself? And how was the experience? But despite all of that, do you think it's still a necessary and good tool?
Yeah, well, the experience when I was in that lifestyle was an absolute nightmare. Some days I'd be getting stopped up to 4 or 5 times a day. I did not like it whatsoever. It was very intrusive. It was very disrupting. But at the same time, it prevented me carrying weapons as often as I may have liked. So there's no doubt in my mind that it definitely reduced the number of victims and it definitely saved lives.
So do you think that those people who campaign against stop and search, be they politicians or activist groups, are not helping? In fact, they're exacerbating the issue and they're helping people carrying knives to evade prosecution and detection.
Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that these campaigners who are campaigning against stop and search, I go to meetings with many of them, and when I dissect what they say and challenge them, then they have no comeback because they don't really understand it. They've never been on the receiving end, and the people they're speaking to are giving, manipulating the situation and playing the victim when most of these kids who are saying they don't like stop and search are actually perpetrators of knife crime.
And it's worth bearing in mind that often we hear in places like London and Birmingham that stop and search disproportionately targets black people, 6 times more likely to be stopped and searched. Yet the data shows us that in London, black people are 4.5 times more likely to stab somebody to death. They're 3.5 times more likely to be stabbed to death themselves. And when we saw violence reduction units in places like Liverpool, in places like Glasgow, they were targeting white working class lads on known estates in known areas. Nobody complained about there being any racism then. It was simply targeted policing in areas with a known knife problem.
Yeah, it depends on the demographics and the makeup of each area. The area where I was, it was predominantly white people that was being stopped and searched. I was amongst those, and I believe I was stopped and searched more than the vast majority of people in the country. Most people I engaged with in my criminal career were black and Asian, and they also had a fear of stop and search. They didn't want to carry weapons when they come to Liverpool, so it is hugely effective. And I don't think it's discriminatory, because it depends on the demographics and the makeup of the area where the issues are occurring. You know, some perpetrators are black, some are white, some are Asian. It's not a black problem, it's not a white problem. You know, it's a problem within our young people, irrespective of their colour, race or culture or religion.
Very succinctly put, and thank you very much for your input. Cesarius McGrath, I hope I got your name right there, reformed gang member and youth rehabilitator. Thank you very much for your time today and joining us. Thank you. Now, don't go anywhere, because the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico is now in a critical condition following an assassination attempt. All the latest on this in just a moment. But first, it's your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories, as we've been hearing, Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico is in a critical condition after he was shot following a government meeting in Handlover outside the capital Bratislava. Officials could be seen bundling the Prime Minister into a car shortly after several shots were heard hitting Mr Fico in the abdomen. He was then airlifted to hospital, where his condition is now life-threatening. A man has now been detained by police. He's been named by local media as Juraj Čantula, a well-known Slovak writer and political activist. We're not yet able to confirm those reports, which are appearing in Slovakian media. The country's president condemned the assassination attempt, describing it as a brutal attack. Rishi Sunak says his thoughts are with the Prime Minister and his family. In other news, police could make more use of existing stop and search powers as part of new measures to tackle knife crime. The searches were curbed a decade ago by then Home Secretary Theresa May after it was found minorities were being disproportionately targeted. The government will invest £3.5 million into developing new technology which could help police detect suspects carrying knives by scanning them from a distance. New proposals could see schools in England banned from teaching students about gender identity. The government's review would also see all sex education halted for children under the age of 9. The Prime Minister ordered a review into relationships, sex and health education last year over concerns some children were being exposed to inappropriate content. A red notice search warrant for an escaped French prisoner has been issued by Interpol. 30-year-old Mohamed Amra, also known as The Fly, escaped from a prison van in northern France yesterday, sparking a major manhunt. He was broken free by gunmen in an ambush that killed 2 prison guards. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now it's time for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to enjoy a spectacular summer with an extra £20,000 in your bank account, all tax-free. It's our biggest prize of the year so far, and here's how it could all be yours.
You really could be our next big winner with an incredible £20,000 in tax-free cash to play with this summer. What would you spend that on? Well, whilst you're thinking about it, listen to some of our previous winners getting that winning phone call from us.
I'm Charles. I'm on £18,000 cash. It was just amazing, and as soon as it goes into your bank account, it just changed. It's a life-changing thing. Just go for it. It's an absolute You must try and go for it.
The next winning call could be answered by you. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. The M62 eastbound Chain Bar Junction 26. Now, just after that turn-off, two lanes are coned off. A trailer, they're separated from a lorry, accused for an hour and a half back to Ainley Top at Junction 24. Now, all the traffic being held at the moment on the anti-clock M60 from 11 Barton through towards 10 at the Trafford Centre and queuing. There's a lorry fire. Queues as well, southbound M42 at the turn for Coventry at 6, queuing back to 7 at Coles Hill. Lane 1 is out for emergency repairs. There's a broken down lorry westbound on the M4 just after Maidenhead 8 and 9, 2 lanes out of 4 coned off, slow going. And the eastbound M27 in the roadworks at Hedge End at Junction 7. This queues back to Southampton Airport at Junction 5, 2 lanes shut there for emergency manhole cover repairs. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Meghan's launched her new lifestyle range, starting with jams. And It's called American Riviera Orchard. Apparently, it's been made by organic fruits grown in Meghan and Harry's Montecito gardens. If we can believe it, I reserve an air of scepticism. But she sent out 50 jars of this jam to influencers and celebrity friends in the hope of trying to boost some sales to her products. But it's ended up winning for King Charles because fans have gone to Highgrove website and King Charles's jam has sold out.
So why did they go?
Has gone through the roof.
Why did they go to the Highgrove website?
Well, I think it's a bit of a blow against Meghan because they're saying we don't want your jam. We're going to go and get the king. So it just shows how popular the king is. This is what she's always wanted. Her dream has been to be like this Gwyneth Paltrow style lifestyle guru. She's always loved Gwyneth's website Goop. When she set up the TIG, which was her website when she was still in Suits as a working actress, that was the brand, the style of brand that she was going for, was this Gwyneth style, New York elite, very princessy. So this is her chance now by trying to cash in on her royal title because she is now a duchess, so she's using that to try and elevate her brand. And she's really now trying to carve out herself as this new Martha Stewart.
And she's coming out with the cooking show as well on Netflix. She's coming out with the cooking show, and I mean, to be fair to Meghan, she has always tried to say that she's into healthy eating, organic food, cooking, but I don't see this being a success. It just will not happen for her because she's just burnt too many bridges. People just don't believe in her brand. They don't think she's authentic. So, are you an actress? Are you a guru? Are you a duchess? Are you a philanthropist? Who are you, Meghan?
Who actually are you? This is what we're asking. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Meghan really knows who she is.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, new data reveals that 3.1 million emergency food parcels were provided to people facing hardship between April 2023 and March 2024. And that's more than ever seen before. Now, the Labour Party say this is a result of 14 years of Tory misery. But is that really the case? Or are some people abusing food banks when they don't really need them? Well, I'm joined in the studio now by the founder of Dad's House, a food bank which has provided over 240,000 meals to over 57,000 people. The legend, Billy McGranagan. Billy, always a delight to have you in. So first, let's talk about the numbers, the government numbers. They're eye-watering. Is that reflective of what you're seeing at Dad's House?
Absolutely, and I think that's only the tip of the iceberg, Martin, because there's roughly 1,200 to 1,300 independent food banks in the UK. And you've got the Salvation Army, you've got schools, you've got social services. You've got so many different organisations that are helping families on a daily basis because people think the cost of living is over, but it's not. You know?
Billy, what's special about your particular food bank, Dad's House, is you don't address the regular clientele. Tell us about the kind of people that come and see you.
Oh, we've got mums, dads, families, middle class. You know, we've got young students who are on 0-hour contracts. We've got people who are working who are absolutely struggling, especially in London with high rents and low wages. And when you've got young men and women on 0-hour contracts, you know what? They work 3 or 4 days a week in the hospitality industry, and they're losing so much money because people are not spending it. People haven't got that disposable income that they once had, you know, so things are tough for everyone.
And one thing that's particularly special about Dad's House, of course, is you cater for dads. You know, a demographic that often there's a lot of shame, a lot of stigma in reaching out for help. So how does that work, and how do men in particular overcome that stigma and get help from you?
I'm glad you asked that, because we are so lucky that although we're a single dad's charity, a food bank is only one of our projects. We've got guitar lessons, we've got dad's yoga, we've got dad's football, breakfast clubs, lunch clubs, family law clinics. There's so much going on. So when a dad comes into Dad's House, no one knows what that person's coming in for. It could be anything. And when a dad's really broke, he'll find out, he'll see the food and he'll say, oh, God, you're a food bank. And a lot of dads don't realise that. They just want to come and have a chat, have a cup of coffee, you know, and express exactly what's going on, especially since COVID and lockdown. You know, a lot of families are breaking up. We're seeing so much family breakdown just now, like never before, and a lot of mental health issues.
And it's a vitally important service. You can offer them a range of support, not only food, but also getting them legal support and all the rest of it. I want to put a point to you, though, that we've been raising throughout the show, Billy, and that is a lot of people have been emailing in today on Your Say, at gbnews.com/Your Say, saying they know people themselves who abuse food banks, who take the mickey, in a sense. Here's one from Anne. She says this: I don't believe for 1 second that all the people using food banks actually need to. What would you say to that, Billy?
Well, no, because everybody's got different circumstances, and you don't know what those circumstances are, especially, in London. And what we have done is built up a brilliant relationship with our clients. We know them all. We'll get between 250 and 350 clients a week just for the food bank alone. And we've helped, as I said, you came out with the figures, over 70,000 families in the last 4 years, you know. So we've got to know so many different nationalities, dads, mums, you know, grandparents. What we do is unbelievable, and we have lunch clubs as well, you know, so it's a whole community event, and we couldn't have done that without the partnerships that we have, you know. So Anne she might know 1 or 2 people, but you're going to get 1 or 2 people doing something everywhere all the time, you know. I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay, and Billy, you're dressed to the nines, and I believe that's because you've just won an award.
I got a Lifetime Achievement Award last week, and we also won the Family Law Clinic Award with Simon Bruce, Berrien Exelby, Simon Miller, William Hogg, Jacqueline Fitzgerald, and our brilliant law students, you know. So for me, that's a dream come true, because I sit in my office at my little table and pick up the phone, Martin, but these guys do all the work, you know, and what we have is gold dust. You know, we're saving families, you know, we're bringing dads back from the brink of isolation, desperation, suicide. You know, what we do in that office, we're a tiny office, but we help dads all over the UK.
Billy, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm a huge fan of you. I think you're a star. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Richly deserved award. That's Billy McGranahan from Dad's House. Welcome to come back anytime. Now, don't go anywhere, because in just a few moments we'll be bringing you all of the latest, as the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico is now in a critical condition following an assassination attempt earlier today. All the latest on this breaking news story in just a moment.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some sunny spells around tomorrow, but a greater chance of some heavy downpours across the south. Again, Northern Scotland may well see the highest temperatures. Low pressure is dominating down to the southwest. This weather front providing a band of thicker cloud and some rain and drizzle over northern England, southern Scotland. That'll peter out, as will the heavy showers we've got scattered across parts of the Midlands through the early evening. So many of us will have a dry night. Quite murky and misty on the east coast, and in the south some thicker fog patches could form through the early hours as well, as temperatures drop to 11 to 12 Celsius. A little cooler in northern Scotland with some clearer skies here. On to Thursday, it is a bit of a messy one. Murky again on some eastern coasts, much of the south starting dry, but the likelihood of some showery rain pushing into parts of eastern England early doors. Any early morning mist and fog in the south should be clearing away by rush hour. Generally dry and bright for Wales and Northern Ireland. Some fine weather again across much of Scotland, although southern Scotland may well start a little dull and damp. And we will again have this breeze coming in from the east. That's going to make for some misty conditions again at times on some of those eastern coasts. Could be a little bit of heart around. But again, for northwest Scotland, we should see plenty of sunny spells. Elsewhere, quite a lot of cloud for northern England and some showery rain working once more, initially into Lincolnshire and East Anglia, but then spreading across parts of the Midlands and later towards Wales. Some heavy showers likely across South Wales and southern England come the afternoon. In the brightest spells here, 20 degrees, 21, 22 in western Scotland, maybe a little higher along the Moray Firth, but cooler again on those North Sea coasts. And cooler where we've got this rainier zone, staying pretty wet across northwest England and North Wales into the evening. The outlook is for more sunshine and showers, but the showers fading through the weekend, many of us looking dry and fine for Sunday.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Gloria Di Piero. This is GB News, Britain's election channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's approaching 4:49. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now let's get more now on the breaking news that the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, who is in a life-threatening condition after being shot earlier today. And joining us now is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, you've been bringing us this story as it's been developing. The latest we heard, the Prime Minister is in a critical condition. Do we have any more information?
Well, as you can imagine, we've been getting reports and video images related to this story coming in all the time. The latest images we can bring you actually show that Prime Minister Robert Fico's helicopter that's just arrived in the town of Banská Bystrica, which is just east of the town Handlova, where this shooting occurred, and you can see medics doing their best to hold blankets up to protect the Prime Minister from the lenses of the media as that stretcher is wheeled in to this local trauma centre. It's a major trauma centre, better equipped than the hospital in Handlova, where he was initially stabilised and then taken to this major trauma centre. They had, Martin, discussed flying him all the way to Bratislava, where, of course, they have bigger and even better equipped hospital units there. But the decision was taken because of the precarious nature of his medical condition. He is critically injured, described as being a life-threatening condition. They decided that a long flight of 110 miles, even in a helicopter, was not advisable. So they've taken them here to this well-equipped local trauma centre to operate on the Prime Minister, on Robert Fico, to try to save his life. But no updates on his condition, really. About an hour and a half ago, we were told that he was in a critical condition, but nothing further since then. Clearly, if he's in surgery, that could be a protracted process as they deal with whatever impact those bullets had. 4 bullets, we're told, rang out, 4 shots rang out. As this suspect, apparently, according to local reports, shouted "Robbo," which is Robert Fico's nickname. He shouted "Robbo," that the Prime Minister was very close by this shooter when those shots rang out. And of course, you can see in the other very dramatic images there of the Prime Minister being scooped up and taken into that vehicle for transportation to hospital, while here the security and police personnel wrestle this suspect to the ground. I should say we've been getting mixed reports about the identity of the alleged attacker. So while we still await some clarity on that, we'll just urge a bit of caution and probably not go there for the time being. It was widely reported a name that was out there related to this individual, but there are now other reports circulating suggesting this person may have been a retired security guard. So until we can actually get that confirmed, we'll just hold off on that. But a very serious situation which has got politicians around the globe understandably very concerned at seeing a fellow politician in Slovakia gunned down like this.
And of course, Robert Fico, well known for policies such as stopping aid to Ukraine, dismantling the state broadcaster in Slovakia, and even pledged to take Slovakia out of NATO. Mark, that's a person with fairly strong views and likely to attract criticism for them.
And a man with a very long political history in Slovakia, the longest serving Prime Minister over a number of periods in office. I think this is his 4th period in office now. In 2018, actually, he was forced to resign following the controversy surrounding the shooting, the murder of an investigative reporter in Slovakia, and accusations swirling around him at the time.
OK, and the very fact he's been taken to a major trauma unit like that, Mark, it looks as this is a very, very serious situation. They were unable to tend to what his needs at a smaller hospital. Mark, it looks bleak.
Well, certainly the reports have put his condition as life-threatening, so we await a formal update from the authorities in Slovakia.
OK, Mark White, thank you very much for all of that latest. And, of course, we'll bring you the latest on that breaking story as it happens throughout the rest of the show. Just to repeat, if you're joining us, the Slovakian Prime Minister was shot and left in a life-threatening condition. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, but now here's your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some sunny spells around tomorrow, but a greater chance of some heavy downpours across the south. Again, Northern Scotland may well see the highest temperatures. Low pressure is dominating down to the southwest. This weather front providing a band of thicker cloud and some rain and drizzle over northern England, southern Scotland. That'll peter out, as will the heavy showers we've got scattered across parts of the Midlands through the early evening. So many of us will have a dry night. Quite murky and misty on the east coast, and in the south some thicker fog patches could form through the early hours as well, as temperatures drop to 11 to 12 Celsius. A little cooler in northern Scotland with some clearer skies here. On to Thursday, it is a bit of a messy one. Murky again on some eastern coasts, much of the south starting dry, but the likelihood of some showery rain pushing into parts of eastern England early doors. Any early morning mist and fog in the south should be clearing away by rush hour. Generally dry and bright for Wales and Northern Ireland. Some fine weather again across much of Scotland, although southern Scotland may well start a little dull and damp. And we will again have this breeze coming in from the east. That's going to make for some misty conditions again at times. On some of those eastern coasts could be a little bit of heart around. But again, for northwest Scotland, we should see plenty of sunny spells. Elsewhere, quite a lot of cloud for northern England and some showery rain working once more, initially into Lincolnshire and East Anglia, but then spreading across parts of the Midlands and later towards Wales. Some heavy showers likely across South Wales and southern England come the afternoon. In the brighter spells here, 20 degrees, 21, 22 in western Scotland, maybe a little higher along the Moray Firth, but cooler again on those North Sea coasts. And cooler where we've got this rainier zone, staying pretty wet across northwest England and North Wales into the evening. The outlook is for more sunshine and showers, but the showers fading through the weekend, many of us looking dry and fine for Sunday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules. Buckley delays of around about 90 minutes on the eastbound M62 as he heads from mainly top 24 towards the scene of two lanes being shut at Chamber Junction 26. It's recovery worker trailer that's separated from a lorry. All traffic still being held anti-clock on the M60, Barton at 11 to the Trafford Centre at 10, queuing back to Swinton at 15 for lorry fire. Queue south on the M42 at Coventry at 6, queuing back to 7 for emergency repairs. A broken down lorry causing hold-ups westbound on the M4 after Maidenhead 8 and 9. Two lanes are out. Slow anti-clock on the M25 junction 12 to Cherty at 11. That's all due to a collision. A long queues eastbound for the M27 at Hedge End junction 7. Queuing back to 5. Two lanes shut in the roadworks for ongoing emergency repairs. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, an assassination attempt has left the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico in a life-threatening condition after he was shot and wounded earlier on. Mr Fico was attacked in front of a cultural community centre in the town where a government meeting was being held. We'll have all the latest on this breaking story. And the policing minister has demanded that police must increase their use of stop and search to tackle knife crime and stop bowing to campaign groups who slam it as racist. And I'll speak to a grandmother who lost her grandson to knife crime. And sex education in England's schools is set to be banned for under 9-year-olds, and a total ban on teaching children they can change their gender. Well, critics say these restrictions could put children at risk, but is it the right move for British children? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always a delight to have your company. Of course, we'll have all the latest on that assassination attempt of the Slovakian Prime Minister. Plus, I'll be talking about knife crime, stop and search. I speak to so many police officers, former police officers, who tell me it's a great tool, an effective, targeted tool to try and stamp out what we clearly have, a spiralling knife crime epidemic. But time and time again, activists say it's racist or divisive, but the facts are the facts, and surely we should be trying to save lives. And I'll talk to a grandmother, Shirley, who lost her grandson to a knife attack, to see what she has to say. Get in touch all the usual ways. And of course, it is gbnews.com/your say. Hundreds of comments to get through before the end of the show. But before all of that, it's your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories this hour. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico is in a critical condition after he was shot following a government meeting in Handlover outside the capital, Bratislava. Officials could be seen bundling the Prime Minister into a car shortly after several shots were heard hitting Mr Fico in the abdomen. He was then airlifted to hospital where his condition is now life-threatening. One man has now been detained by authorities. The country's president condemned the assassination attempt, describing it as a brutal attack. Mr Fico won power for a fourth time last October and has implemented more pro-Russian policies. He's pledged to stop military support for Ukraine and threatened to veto the country's membership in NATO. In other news, the Keir Starmer used all 6 questions at today's Prime Minister's questions to grill Rishi Sunak about overcrowded prisons as emergency measures were triggered to deal with the problem in England. It means defendants in police custody remain there and won't be transferred to courts for bail hearings. The Labour leader referenced a recent report which says high-risk prisoners are being released up to 70 days early at short notice without sufficient planning. On Monday, the Prime Minister suggested Labour cannot be trusted with national security.
Does the early release of stalkers, domestic abusers and those considered a risk to children sound like the work of someone who is making the country more secure?
Mr Speaker, as I've said, no one should be put on this scheme if they are a threat to the public. And let me be crystal clear, it does not apply. And let me be absolutely clear, it does not apply to anyone serving a life sentence, anyone convicted of a serious violent offence, anyone convicted of terrorism, anyone convicted of a sex offence. And crucially, in contrast to the system that Labour had put in place, Mr Speaker, governors in the prison service have an absolute lock so that no one is put on the scheme who shouldn't be.
Police could make more use of existing stop and search powers as part of new measures to tackle knife crime. The searches were curbed a decade ago by then Home Secretary Theresa May after it was found minorities were being disproportionately targeted. £3.5 million will be invested into developing new technology, which could help police detect suspects carrying knives by scanning them from a distance. New proposals could see schools in England banned from teaching students about gender identity. The government's review would also see all sex education halted for children under the age of 9. The Prime Minister ordered a review into relationships, sex and health education last year over concerns some children were being exposed to inappropriate content. Reports suggest parents will be provided samples of sex education content before lessons take place. A red notice search warrant for an escaped French prisoner has been issued by Interpol. 30-year-old Mohamed Amra, also known as The Fly, escaped from a prison van in northern France yesterday, sparking a major manhunt. He was broken free by gunmen in an ambush that killed 2 prison guards. More food parcels were handed out over the past year than ever before. The Trussell Trust says it donated more than 3 million emergency packages in the year to the end of March, as the cost of living puts more households under strain. More than 1 million of those were for children, and the overall total has almost doubled in just 5 years. The Trust is calling on the government to tackle long-term deficiencies in the welfare system. The mother of Barnaby Webber, who was stabbed and killed in Nottingham last year, has told GB News she feels the killer's sentence was the result of a flawed and weak police investigation. Barnaby Webber, Grace O'Malley-Kumar and Ian Coates were killed last June by Valdo Callicane. The 32-year-old, who suffers from paranoid schizophrenia, was given an indefinite hospital order. Emma Webber says the case has revealed weaknesses in the legal system.
We were not expecting anything other than the outcome yesterday. I think we've hopefully made it very clear that all 3 families united do not accept the plea of diminished responsibility, so therefore manslaughter, alongside the attempted murder charges. And we feel it's the result of a very, very flawed and failed police investigation and a weak CPS prosecution from the East Midlands, and an utter over-reliance upon doctors' reports.
For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Martin.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now let's get more on the breaking news story on the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, who is in a life-threatening condition after being shot earlier on today in an assassination attempt. And joining us now is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, you've been bringing us the latest details on this story as they've been emerging. What do we know so far for those just joining us, and what's the latest?
Well, we can bring you now some dramatic new video just obtained by GB News that show the moments of this assassination attempt. You can see that the security detail and the Prime Minister up at that barrier on what is a meet and greet, meeting members of the public, and then clearly shots ring out. The Prime Minister falls to the floor at that point as members of the security services, his close security detail, grapple with the person on the other side of the barrier who has that handgun, who's just opened fire. Very dramatic images there, just from local media in Slovakia, just obtained by GB News. We also brought you just 15 minutes ago other new images that showed the Prime Minister, Robert Fico, arriving at a hospital, an area trauma centre just not too far from where the shooting happened in the town of Handlova. Well, this area medical centre is in Banska Bystrica, which is just east of that town of Handlova. It has a bigger trauma centre. They were, Martin, weighing up whether, given the very serious nature of the injuries, to fly the Prime Minister to a bigger medical centre in the capital, Bratislava, but they decided, because of the precarious medical condition that he was in, that it would be too long a journey to take him 110 miles to Bratislava, even by helicopter. So they decided to take him the shorter journey to this area medical centre, which is still well equipped. He is undergoing surgery at the moment, but we haven't had any other update on the Prime Minister's condition. Worth a think playing, if we can, the images again just obtained by GB News of the moment when the Prime Minister was shot at. He'd gone up to the security barriers there to speak to members of the public, as politicians the world over do, as they try to connect, of course, with the electorate. Shots rang out. Members of the security detail quickly trying to grab this individual, the attacker who fired those shots, as the Prime Minister himself fell to the ground. Other images that we have showed the moments just after this where the security detail scooped up the Prime Minister and took him to a waiting armoured limousine for that journey to the local hospital in Handlova, where he was initially treated by the medics at Handlova Hospital, but of course a smaller hospital there. They just didn't have the capacity and capability there to be able to deal with the very serious nature of Prime Minister Fico's injuries. So that's why he was flown to this hospital in Banska Bystrica, where he is undergoing those medical procedures, surgery that is being carried out at the moment with a view to trying to save this man's life. And all the while, of course, as these images are being played out now around the world, political leaders around the world are expressing their utter horror at what has happened here, because politicians, by their very nature, they want to get close to the electorate, to speak to the public, and it carries risks, though, as we've seen here and in other incidents around the world where politicians have come to harm. This just the latest, but a very shocking development in this town of Handlova, about 100 miles from the Slovakian capital, Bratislava, where their Prime Minister, Robert Fico, was shot multiple times and critically injured.
OK, Mark White, thank you for that update. And as you say, dramatic footage, of course. Now, so many people with their mobile phones at any events like this. We have the shooting captured there. As you can see, this is the attempted assassination earlier on of the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, and then footage of the aftermath, the immediate aftermath of the Prime Minister being scooped into a parliamentary car, as Mark White said, to try and get him treatment, and also footage of the would-be assailant being arrested and detained. Mark White, thanks for that update. Of course, we'll come back to you for more when it breaks through. Let's cut now back to our studio and talk to Chris Hope, our political editor. Chris, what strikes me about that is how chilling that could be for any politician anywhere on an ordinary walkabout. I mean, extremely worrying stuff.
That film obtained by Mark White for GBNews will send shockwaves, chills through Whitehall. What everyone worries about, you ask anyone in security, is the walkabout. You have to do walkabouts to meet the voters, look like you're one of the people. You can't be always flying past them in a police-escorted motorcade. You've got to be with people on the ground, shaking hands to voters, and then that can happen. That gun coming out, we think is a gun in the individual's hand, him being pounced on, really, really alarming. And you are seeing a lot of reaction across politics, international politics, of other world leaders thinking, gosh, you know, there go any of us, really. This idea of a lone threat in a crowd, Robbo, come over here, whatever was said to Robert Fico. We're seeing reaction already from the Irish Prime Minister, Michael Martin, deeply shocked, appalled by the attack. Violent, reckless shooting is a direct attack on democracy itself. The Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas, saying it's an assault on the very idea of democracy. Our own Prime Minister, I'm sure we'll hear more from him later, but the initial reaction from Rishi Sunak was he was shocked to hear this awful news. All our thoughts are with the Prime Minister, Fico, and his family. What they're saying here is an attack on democracy. I think that's why it's important to GBNews viewers to see it as an attack on our political system. And that's why any assassination attempt like this will be really alarming to people who keep our politicians safe.
Thank you, Chris Hope, for that update. Wow, yeah, an astonishing moment. And joining me now is the defence editor at the Evening Standard, Robert Fox. Robert, welcome to the show. It's always a delight to have your company. I'm afraid it's in rather more concerning circumstances now. As we look into this, Robert, an attack on democracy itself, it's being labelled astonishing footage there of the would-be assassin just walking right up to Robert Fico with a gun. We can see footage of the arrest of Mr Fico being taken away in a parliamentary car, and then other footage of him arriving at a trauma treatment centre via helicopter, now in a critical condition, life-threatening condition. And Robert Fox, this just goes to show us how perilous it can be on the front line of politics.
Yeah, this is campaign season in Europe because the European parliamentary elections are coming up. And of course, Slovakia is on the front line, very close to the front line with the Ukrainian conflict. It borders Poland, as we know. And Fico himself is quite a controversial figure because he has at times opposed EU funding, open-ended funding for Ukraine, and he has taken a strong stance on issues like LGBTQ. And in fact, there was a demonstration but from the left planned for today, which has now been cancelled in view of this dreadful news. What worries me is that East Central Europe is now on the roil. There is trouble in many, many different places, both inside the EU and outside. Georgia, Moldova, the Baltic states are very worried at this time. And just one mustn't rush to judgment about this attempt, but it's a very strange one. Always they are strange. This is not the activity of a professional assassin. So what is really going on here? We can speculate. 4 very serious gunshots to the stomach. That's not the work of a professional assassin.
Robert Fox, the political background of Robert Fico might give us some indication. As you said, their hardline stance on stopping aid to Ukraine, also wanted to dismantle the state broadcaster in Slovakia, its version of the BBC, and also take Slovakia out of NATO. Mr Fico is a pro-Russian populist, believed to have very strong links to the Kremlin. This all adds to the feeling that he is a substantial political target in that sense, holding views that many others will find pretty unsavoury.
Yeah, and he's very, very close to Viktor Orban, next door in Hungary. You're absolutely right, a dissident voice, pro-Russian, and that's why anything can happen. This could be, and I don't want to go too far here, but it mustn't be ruled out that this could be what is known as a false flag operation by Russia. The trouble is that particularly with the instability at the top of the Kremlin, with very important figures being removed and shuffled around, namely Mr. Shoigu, but also his former deputies being charged, and there's a big movement around there, and what's going on in the Caucasus, in Chechnya, and to the north, that these asymmetric, non-obvious activities are now very much the order of the day. And what I fear is that this could be the beginning of quite a lot of very unpredictable disturbance in this part of the world. And it cannot be detached from the very serious situation that we are in Ukraine at the moment.
And Roberts, adding to that, we were covering yesterday from Tbilisi, from Georgia, protests on the streets there. A similar clampdown, in a way, on the state broadcaster there, again with rumours, links to the Kremlin, to Vladimir Putin, throwing his influence and the geopolitics of that. Robert, fascinating, because, of course, Georgia has aspirations of becoming a European Union member. Brussels would like that. A lot of Georgians would like that. And that may also have inklings towards its membership of NATO. It seems, Robert, yesterday Georgia, today Slovakia, there's a lot of disturbance in this axis of
Serbia, Kosovo, North Macedonia, Montenegro, just to name but a few. Yes, a lot of activity, and in half of them you can see Russian fingerprints.
And do you think that's what this is starting to feel like? Again, we mustn't speculate, but 2 incidents...
It's very difficult to jump to conclusion. I don't think... this is so theatrical behind the facade, there is something going on, particularly as you say, Fico himself is such a very strong presence. He was out of politics for a bit. He's very much a comeback kid, and he's very much associated with the Kremlin, and he's very much associated within the EU family as being a thorn in the backside of Brussels.
And that leads me on to my next question. Of course, in around about 3 weeks' time, between June the 6th and the 9th, we are seeing EU elections. Of course, Slovakia is a member state. It joined in 2004. Today's events, so an attempted assassination of a prime minister, must cast a huge shadow, a huge influence over those elections. And maybe that is why, Robert, a lot of people are saying this is an attack on democracy itself.
Yeah, it raises a flag. It's very, very important, these elections. Of course, skeptics about the activity profile and performance of the European Parliament say, well, it hasn't performed over much. It's supposed to control the budget. It's supposed to put a brake on the EU Commission. And historically, even since first we had direct elections from the 1970s to this Parliament, it really hasn't quite come up to the top billing. But it is a very important opinion, weather vane, and an indication of beliefs and attitudes. And that's why this event of today in mid-Slovakia is of the utmost importance. Look, we've seen it already. You rightly at GB News have been reading out the reactions right across the piece on social media, on X, on Telegram, and on Instagram. It is a major event.
Robert Fox, excellent analysis, as ever. The defence editor at the Evening Standard. Thank you very much for your insight, Robert Fox. And, of course, we'll bring you more on that assassination attempt of the Slovakian Prime Minister throughout the rest of the show. But moving back to Britain, we'll soon be speaking to the grandmother of a knife crime victim next about her thoughts on the concerns from the government that the police are not using stop and search tactics often enough.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
What
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Well, Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones is a first-language Welsh speaker and joins us now. Gareth, I mean, a lot of people will be thinking, hang on, this guy is a Welsh teacher. He speaks English. He knew what was on the parking ticket. He's just trying to make a point. He's being a prat, isn't he?
No, hey, come on, mate. I'm a first language Welsh. It's important that we watch after our language and, that everything's bilingual. For us in Wales, you wouldn't go to France and expect your ticket to be in English, would you? English is the most spoken language, but let's watch after these small languages. It's part of our cultural. So, I take my hat off to the guy. Fair play to him for go out and to fight this. But what it's done is put it onto the mainstream media, and you're talking about it, even that you're calling him a that. At least we're having a discussion about it, and it's putting the Welsh language in the forefront. And, Gareth, speaking Welsh is important.
Yeah, so Gareth, this is a matter of principle. Is there a sense that the Welsh language is being eradicated in Wales? Is this something that the Welsh people need to rise up against?
Well, Welsh government are trying to, bring a lot more Welsh speaking into our daily life and teach people how to speak Welsh. Well, everything should be bilingual then. And I think, it should start with government. So government should be putting pressure on these companies to make sure everything is bilingual. So I get behind this guy. Fair play to him. It's a good stance, and it puts it in the public eye. Let's have everything in both languages, especially Welsh, because that's my first language. And I'm not
what? If I was Welsh, if I were Welsh, I think I would agree with you. I think I would agree with you, Gareth.
It depends if you come from Wrexham.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. By it's 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, moving on, because the government is telling the police that they must use their stop and search powers to tackle knife crime rather than to what they say to appease campaign groups who claim that the method is discriminatory. Well, Policing Minister Chris Philp says that stop and search is a vital tool in helping remove knives off the streets, but is concerned that it is not being used often enough by police. Well, joining me now to discuss this is a grandmother who lost her grandson to knife crime, and that is Julie Taylor. Thank you very much for coming on the show today. Julie, as difficult as it is, would you please mind sharing with us what happened?
31st of January 2020, my grandson was in a village pub having a quiet drink with his mate, and he was murdered by knife crime. It should be his 24th birthday tomorrow, but we lost him at 19. So tomorrow it's the 5th birthday we've been without him. He was murdered by known knife carriers. Some had been in prison before for carrying knives. There should be zero tolerance whatsoever. And anyone that opposes it probably hasn't been affected by knife crime. And if they want to come and live in my family for a month, a week, even a day, they'll feel the pain that we feel.
And Julie, I'm so sorry. Julie, I'm so sorry for the loss of your grandson, Liam. Nothing can bring him back. You campaign on this issue now. You campaign on this because you don't want this to happen to anybody else. And when you hear about the politicians wanting more stop and search, and yet we see this continual resistance to do so, how must that make you feel?
I feel like we're going around in circles because the police are doing a wonderful job, putting their life on the line. There's politicians and MPs that are doing fantastic jobs, but there's those few people that don't do it, it's racial, it's this and that. No, it's not. We're only affecting the people that are carrying the knives that don't want to be stopped, So my opinion would be every area in the UK has got gang members, has got known knife carriers. So keep disrupting their life, keep stopping them, keep on and on. So eventually they might think, we're not going to bother today. It's not worth picking up that knife, We know now we've got children as young as 8, 10 years old picking up a knife. They probably do think it's for their own protection. We need to educate those children. We need to stop the sales of the knives. There's so many things, we could be here all night discussing this, and we all say the same thing, and we all just go around in circles. But it's like, we've got to stop them carrying the knives in the first place, and stop and search is so needed.
And Judy, it's astonishing to hear you say that it was known knife carriers that took Liam. How do you mean? You knew this was happening, but did the police know and they did nothing?
Well, when one or two of them have already been to court or been in prison for stabbing somebody, then it's on social media, isn't it? I don't blame the police. I don't blame anybody, but it's gone on too long, too much. And it's just got to be stopped. We've got to have zero tolerance now. We're just losing kids every single day. And, older people as well.
And Julie, we're just seeing a picture now of your beautiful grandson there, Liam, on the screen. Again, I'm so sorry, the birthday tomorrow. I'm getting emotional myself. What would you like to see done, in honour of Liam's memory, in honour of his birthday? Stop and search is one thing, but what would you really like to see done? We know Number 10 watches this show. What would you like to say now to the Prime Minister's office?
Well, I'm actually in talks. There's a brilliant MP in Southend, Anna Firth. She's putting things through Parliament at the moment to stop the sale of zombie and machetes. That goes through in September. But unfortunately, everything takes so long in government. You know, this has been going on for quite a while now. September is there. It's going to happen, and it is going to happen. But unfortunately, once those knives are banned, they're still going to be in the area. There's still going to be more knives brought in. So we've got to now say, you know what, zero tolerance now, no knives on the streets. That's, you know, I've seen today that the government are going to put in £4 million for the new scanners and things like that. Excellent. You know, but again, we're going around in circles because if we didn't have the knives, they wouldn't have to spend the money. But let's do as much as we possibly can to stop everything, you know, stop them being, you can go online and buy a knife like this for 99 pence. So you can have your pocket money £10 a week, or you can have your paper round money. You can go and buy a $9.99 machete with that, and you are going to carry it if you're one of these people that are going to carry a knife. They're just too easy to get hold of.
Judy, you're absolutely right. You can buy these knives on the internet. You can buy them on social media. That is a huge issue. Is the answer, Judy, as well as detection, as well as scanning, as well as increased technology, as well as parliamentarians supporting this, is the answer to come down much harder? Is the answer, Judy, just to slam these people in prison straight away? What would you like to see done on that front?
Yeah, so stop all sales. You know, we've got, I know I can't mention things, but there's certain companies that are online that sell clothes and sell 99 or 49B knives with free deliveries. You know, it doesn't matter if you've got a zombie knife or you've got a 2-inch knife, it's still going to kill somebody. So stop all these online sales. Let's ban them literally instantly.
OK. I think most people watching this will heartily agree. Judy Taylor, thanks for joining us. And once again, so sorry for your loss of your grandson, Liam, 24 tomorrow. Good luck with that. Really wish you the very, very best. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, don't go anywhere, because the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico is in a critical condition following an assassination attempt. All the latest on this in just a moment, and we're expecting to be joined by the former Defence Select Committee Chair, Tobias Elwood. But first, it's your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories this hour. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico is in a critical condition after he was shot following a government meeting in Handlova outside the capital Bratislava. Officials could be seen bundling the Prime Minister into a car shortly after several shots were heard hitting Mr Fico in the abdomen. He was then airlifted to hospital, where his condition is now life-threatening. One man has now been detained by authorities. The country's president condemned the assassination attempt, describing it as a brutal attack. Mr Fico won power for a 4th time last October and has implemented more pro-Russian policies. He's pledged to stop military support for Ukraine and threatened to veto the country's membership in NATO. Police could make more use of existing stop-and-search powers as part of new measures to tackle knife crime. The government will also invest £3.5 million into developing new technology, which could help police detect suspects carrying knives by scanning them from a distance. New proposals could see schools in England banned from teaching students about gender identity. The government's review would also see all sex education halted for children under the age of 9. The Prime Minister ordered a review into relationships, sex and health education last year over concerns some children were being exposed to inappropriate content. In the United States, President Biden will take part in a televised debate with Donald Trump. The current and former presidents will go head-to-head on the 27th of June. In a video posted to social media, President Biden said that Mr Trump had lost 2 debates in 2020 and hasn't shown up for another one since. Mr Trump says he's now ready and willing. And a red notice search warrant for an escaped French prisoner has been issued by Interpol. 30-year-old Mohamed Amra, also known as The Fly, escaped from a prison van in northern France yesterday, sparking a major manhunt. He was broken free by gunmen in an ambush that killed 2 prison guards. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club.
proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2659 and €1.1655 euros. The price of gold is £1,881.82 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's closed at 8,445 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now there's still plenty of time to win our biggest cash prize of the year so far, a whopping £20,000 tax-free. Now imagine having all of that money in your bank account this summer. Well, imagine no more, because you could win the lot, and here's how you could do it.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize so far. A totally terrific £20,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer spectacular. You could use that cash to splash out on a holiday, make the garden glam, buy a new car, or just save it for a rainy day. Whatever you'd spend £20,000 on, make sure you don't miss the chance to make it yours. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I am Johnny Ratner with the very latest. Long queues heading east on the M62 through West Yorkshire after a trailer came off a lorry just after the Chain Bar exit south of Bradford, although all lanes are back open now. On the M42 in the West Midlands, the inside lanes closed heading south at Junction 6, the Birmingham Airport turnoff for emergency barrier repairs after a van struck the central reservation this morning. Long queues back to Coles Hill. North London, the A10 remains shut at Stamford Hill, been the case since last night for an ongoing police investigation. And heading west on the M4 through Berkshire, long delays. The two left lanes are shut just after the Maidenhead exit, Junction 8-9, where a lorry's broken down. And on the M27 in Hampshire, the two inside lanes of free are shut eastbound at Junction 7 at Hedge End for emergency manhole cover repair works. That's causing long queues back towards Southampton. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Between 1955 and 1989, an average of 55 nuclear tests were conducted across the globe each year. More than 30,000 young British and Commonwealth servicemen served at British test locations in Australia and the Pacific Ocean. But in the years since, those who were involved say they've been ignored and lied to about their exposure to radiation. For decades, Lab Rats International has represented the millions across the world exposed to fallout from the testing programmes and the families who still suffer today from illness and deformities. Last year, the government unveiled the Nuclear Test Medal, recognising the military, civilian and overseas staff and personnel who participated in Britain's nuclear testing programme in the 1950s. But for Lab Rats founder Alan Owen, whose own father was a nuclear test veteran, the work is only just beginning. In September, they launched a legal challenge to the Ministry of Defence to provide the test veterans full medical records, which they say they've been denied access to.
We sit in this bubble as the nuclear test veteran community, fighting against the establishment. And they will say, ministers will go in Parliament and say, all you've got to do is apply for your medical records and they'll give them to you. It just doesn't happen. It's not a reality. They're not there to as easy, as accessible as just applying. They will fight you all the way. They will delay it.
In response, a government spokesperson said, "We are grateful to all service personnel who participated in the British nuclear testing programme, which is why we have formally recognised them with an official medal. Nuclear test veterans who believe they have suffered ill health due to service have the existing and long-standing right to apply for no-fault compensation under the War Pension Scheme." The fight for these veterans and their families lives on, because thousands who came before never got the recognition and justice for their service.
Welcome back. It's 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, more on that assassination attempt now on the Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, who's in a life-threatening condition after being shot earlier this afternoon. And joining me now is the Conservative MP, former Defence Select Committee Chair and Officer of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Slovakia, Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, thank you for joining us on the show. Earlier, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has commented on this. He posted on social media saying, shocked to hear this awful news. Our thoughts are with the Prime Minister, Fico, and his family. What would you like to add?
Yeah, I absolutely support what Prime Minister Sunak has said. I actually grew up not far from Slovakia, which is why I'm involved with the APPG, as you mentioned. I grew up in Vienna in Austria, which is only a few dozen miles away from Bratislava, the capital of Slovakia. This is a relative safe country. It's highly developed economy. It's part of the EU now. It's on the Danube. It's just not used to these events such as this, and it sent shockwaves across the country. Now, it has shone light on the Prime Minister, Robert Fico himself, who he is. The country is going through a state of flux at the moment, polarized like so many other countries are in Eastern Europe, unsure whether to look more towards the east, towards Moscow, towards Putin, or indeed embrace greater, collaboration with the West. Fico is a controversial figure, no doubt about it. Been in power before, came back into office 2023, and clearly at odds with his own president and wanting to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, and indeed from allowing any military aid going to Ukraine as well. So lots of questions to be asked about what happens from a political perspective. We're waiting for more information. I suppose the biggest concern I have is the worry that this might be used in some way to fast-track draconian laws to bolster the government's position to advance its control over the state, given, of course, what we saw in Georgia only a few days ago, a very similar circumstance there, where the Prime Minister is wanting to push through controversial pro-Kremlin laws against the advice and the will of the president, and indeed many of the people in the country as well. So a lot of questions and focus on what's happening in Eastern Europe at the time, as, of course, Russia and Putin is getting ever more confident given what's happening in Ukraine.
And Tobias added to those views also, Mr. Fico wanted to dismantle the state broadcaster in Slovakia, again with echoes of what we've been seeing in Georgia. As you mentioned, we were in Tbilisi yesterday covering the protests there against that, and once again with rumours of Kremlin control. He also wanted to take Slovakia out of NATO. So we have a very politically precarious situation. Do you think that may be part of the backdrop of this destabilisation of Slovakia with Eastern Putin, Kremlin-led control?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we saw this with Ukraine as well back in 2014, choosing to look east rather than west. That triggered the whole of the problems with the Donbass and indeed the Crimea. Perhaps the state of confidence that we're seeing from President Putin is growing by the week. And if we see the Kharkiv, the second city in Ukraine, fall to the Russians, I'm afraid it's probably going to be all over for any prospect of Ukraine to reunite the country as one sovereign state. It shows that it isn't just Ukraine what's happening here. There are tectonic plates moving across Eastern Europe with huge ramifications for the geopolitics of Europe, impact for European economy and indeed European security as well.
And Tobias, we just spoke with Chris Hope, our political editor, and he said that Westminster, Whitehall will be very shocked at this, not just about what's happened in Slovakia, but with implications, of course, for political security on British soil. We talk a lot, don't we, about the increased security threat to British politicians in those walkabout moments where you're very up close and personal with the public. That's a necessary part of politics. And of course, we've seen before with David Amess, Conservative MP, who was killed in 2021 in October. Does this have a bearing now of a security issue for all parliamentarians across the world, including in Britain?
Yeah, you touch on two important subjects there. First is the exposure, the ability for any member of the public to engage with parliamentarians. It's something that we absolutely embrace and try to encourage. That's exactly what we want. We want the British public to have access to parliamentarians. That's part and parcel of the work that we do. But ultimately, the world is getting more dangerous, as we can see. And it's now resonated again in another country. But you touch on something else as well, which is what is happening in Slovakia, what is happening in Eastern Europe. If we are going to see another state look at exiting NATO, for example, there are some bigger questions about European security. We've got Donald Trump potentially winning the United States elections there. What impact will that have as well? I'm sure that there'll be a lot of back-channel conversations, behind-the-scenes discussions between capital cities in Europe at the moment. Lots of to consider at the next G7, the next NATO meeting, and indeed for the EU as well.
OK, Tobias Elwood, thank you very much for joining us on GB News and sharing your thoughts on the attempted assassination of Robert Fico, Slovakian Prime Minister. Thank you very much for your time. Now stay with us because I'm getting a reaction to that government plan to ban sex education in England's schools for under 9-year-olds, including a total ban on teaching children that they can change their gender. You will not want to miss this conversation. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some sunny spells around tomorrow, but a greater chance of some heavy downpours across the south. Again, northern Scotland may well see the highest temperatures. Low pressure is dominating down to the southwest. This weather front providing a band of thicker cloud and some rain and drizzle over northern England, southern Scotland. That'll peter out, as will the heavy showers we've got scattered across parts of the Midlands through the early evening. So many of us will have a dry night. Quite murky and misty on the east coast, and in the south some thicker fog patches could form through the early hours as well, as temperatures drop to 11 to 12 Celsius. A little cooler in northern Scotland with some clearer skies here. On to Thursday, it is a bit of a messy one. Murky again on some eastern coasts, much of the south starting dry, but the likelihood of some showery rain pushing into parts of eastern England early doors. Any early morning mist and fog in the south should be clearing away by rush hour. Generally dry and bright for Wales and Northern Ireland. Some fine weather again across much of Scotland, although southern Scotland may well start a little dull and damp. And we will again have this breeze coming in from the east. That's going to make for some misty conditions again at times. On some of those eastern coasts could be a little bit of heart around. But again, for northwest Scotland, we should see plenty of sunny spells. Elsewhere, quite a lot of cloud for northern England and some showery rain working once more, initially into Lincolnshire and East Anglia, but then spreading across parts of the Midlands and later towards Wales. Some heavy showers likely across South Wales and southern England come the afternoon. In the brighter spells here, 20 degrees, 21, 22 in western Scotland, maybe a little higher along the Moray Firth, but cooler again on those North Sea coasts. And cooler where we've got this rainier zone, staying pretty wet across northwest England and North Wales into the evening. The outlook is for more sunshine and showers, but the showers fading through the weekend. Many of us looking dry and fine for Sunday.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's coming up to 5:49 now. Schools in England will be banned from teaching sex education to children under 9 in new government guidance expected to be published tomorrow. Well, the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, will also announce that once sex education starts, pupils must be taught about the reality of biological sex. Well, joining us now in the studio is the broadcaster, Lucy Beresford. Lucy, welcome to the show. So there are two schools of thought on this. On the one hand, it's common sense. It's protecting children. Why should we expose 9-year-olds to sex education, particularly ideas about LGBTQ and trans stuff? On the other hand, is it mollycoddling them to the point of endangering them? Is it too Victorian?
Yeah, so my worry is that we're missing the perfect opportunity to keep our children safe. Now, the controversial thing that I'm about to say is that children are sexual creatures. They're not sexualised, but they are sexual. They have genitalia, they're very curious about their own genitalia, and they're very curious about the genitalia of other people. And they want to know where babies come from, and they want to talk about these things.
At age 9?
No, from 3 or 4, you will know from having children yourself that children start asking questions very, very early. They don't realise that the questions they're asking are to do with sex. And it isn't about teaching them about sex. It's about answering their questions. But very specifically, it's also about making sure that they're safe. And my worry is that if this educational material is watered down too much, and I think it's very fair that there is some content that is inappropriate at the moment, but if we water it down too much, we're missing out on the opportunity to keep our children safe so that they learn about the fact that their body is an autonomous space and that issues around consent and abuse need to be carefully managed so that they can keep themselves safe.
That's all good. That's all fair and well. I'm a parent. I've done a lot of talks in schools about sexual education, keeping children safe.
And you've also made a programme about porn, so you know that it is actually a topic that needs to be addressed very early on.
But not with 9-year-olds.
But specifically because 9-year-olds have grown up. 9-year-olds have siblings that are older than them. They have access to the internet. They, in some cases, have access to smartphones, although that's a whole other story.
But they have access to parents. So the conversation is, is it the school's job to be acting as that, particularly if they're planting ideologies, particularly around the LGBTQ stuff, the trans stuff, into young minds?
Now, that's where I would agree with you. I think that there is certain information that didn't need to be given to children and certainly didn't need to be spoken about in such stark terms. There aren't 127 genders, for example. But the idea that we can't talk to our children about sex because we're going to make sure that the parents do, unfortunately, talking to your child about sex makes parents very squeamish. They just don't want to do it. And therefore, we need to make sure that these conversations are happening at some point in a child's childhood, before they become sexually active, before they reach puberty, for example, because they need to know about this stuff in advance. And if we don't tell them, they're going to find out about it from the internet, and the information might not be accurate.
Yeah, but it's a valid point to say. I spoke to hundreds and hundreds of parents who are concerned that schools are becoming activists. They're planting ideas in young minds that simply confuse children.
Well, the interesting thing is that quite a lot of the information that teachers were told they could tell their children was given to them by the government, let's say 10 years ago. And I think what happened during the pandemic, for example, was that a lot of parents having to homeschool their children suddenly discovered the information that they were having to convey. And that's when a lot of parents became very worried. But unfortunately, I'm also very aware that a lot of parents just don't want to talk about this subject. And so we've got to make sure that teachers step up and, as I say, from a very early age, from 4 and 5 and 6, when children start asking these questions, you talk to them in age-appropriate language. Otherwise, you raise a whole generation of people who are not safe sexually, and they don't think that safe sex is accessible to them.
OK, thank you. We have to leave it there. Lucy Beresford, thanks for your input. Now, that's it for me. Jubes & Co, of course, is up next. Don't forget to join us from 6 a.m. tomorrow. It's Breakfast with Stephen and Ellie. And, of course, that's then followed by Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 a.m. with Andrew and Bev. And then, of course, it's Tom and Emily with Good Afternoon Britain from midday. Then it's My Ugly Mush. I'll be back at 3 p.m, 3 till 6. And, of course, after that is Jubes & Co. Now, Jubes & Co is up next. And later on, there's an astonishing meeting of two godfathers of the political right. Nigel Farage will appear on the Jacob Rees-Mogg show. Jacob would like him to be a Tory MP. Let's see what he's got to say about that. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Thanks for your company. It's been superb. Thanks. It's been a delight. Now, next is your weather, and here's Alex Deacon.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Some sunny spells around tomorrow, but a greater chance of some heavy downpours across the south. Again, northern Scotland may well see the highest temperatures. Low pressure is dominating down to the southwest. This weather front providing a band of thicker cloud and some rain and drizzle over northern England, southern Scotland. That'll peter out, as will the heavy showers we've got scattered across parts of the Midlands through the early evening. So many of us will have a dry night. Quite murky and misty on the east coast, and in the south some thicker fog patches could form through the early hours as well, as temperatures drop to 11 to 12 Celsius. A little cooler in northern Scotland with some clearer skies here. On to Thursday, it is a bit of a messy one. Murky again on some eastern coasts, much of the south starting dry, but the likelihood of some showery rain pushing into parts of eastern England early doors. Any early morning mist and fog in the south should be clearing away by rush